Chapter 163, Secret Territory? I haven't yet thought of another way. Hushi pondered for a moment, then suddenly took out a blank jade slip. After pouring her divine sense into it for a quarter of an hour, she then threw it to Qinglong. Here's a detailed description of the jade fire toad's characteristics, growth habit, and appearance. In the future, when all of you go out, pay a lot of attention when looking for it. If you can find a jade fire toad, I guarantee that Nangong you will no longer need to enter the flame cave. At first Qinglong and the old doctor had thought that Hushi was only speaking nonsense, but when they saw the detailed descriptions vividly imprinted on the jade slip, they couldn't help but somewhat believe her. If it was only nonsense, it wouldn't be possible to compile such detailed information in such a short amount of time. Thinking that finding the jade fire toad could cure Master's illness, Qinglong became excited. I'll immediately convey this information to everyone we know. I will use Hell King Manor's influence and try to find the jade fire toad with all my strength. Master's illness, we entrust it to Princess. Hushi waved her hand before turning around and leaving Hell King Manor. The moment she passed through Hell King Manor's gate, she suddenly stopped with an annoyed expression on her face. Why was she becoming more and more accustomed to the title of princess? She was now starting to feel that it was proper and to be expected. This is simply not scientific. Hushi refused Qinglong's offer to arrange guards to accompany her home, hurriedly walking in the direction of her courtyard since flying swords weren't allowed to be used in Yanjing City. Before leaving her courtyard, although she alone had led those assassins away, she couldn't be sure whether or not the Drought Demon organization had sent other people to follow Wet Nurse Chun and the others. Therefore, Hushi was now very worried about the safety of Wet Nurse Chun, Xiaoli and the rest. At this moment, Yanjing City was full of clamoring. Wherever she passed, she now and then heard the lamenting of families. Spiritual plants were withered, the crystal stones that weren't placed in storage tools had turned into dust, and even high-level magical items were damaged. Cold sweat dripped down Hushi's forehead. She really hadn't expected that what she and Dandan did last night would lead to such a big commotion now. Let alone those spiritual plants. Even all the flowers and grass that she passed along the way seemed to have lost their vitality. Their leaves drooped, all dull and listless. Now what she had done was the talk of the town. But when Hushi passed the city's most prosperous East Street, she found that the atmosphere here and its surroundings were somewhat different. The street was filled with anger, irritability, and disappointment. Sometime overnight, every hotel and restaurant had had a sudden influx of unfamiliar martial artists. The average cultivation base was foundation establishment stage, but there were also quite a lot of meridians stage too. Even Hushi, as she weaved through the crowd on the second story of the intoxicated immortal restaurant, could detect several strong gold core stage martial artists. These martial artists' faces showed both nervousness and excitement. Occasionally they would glance to the west, their eyes filled with determination, greed, and desire. Hushi frowned slightly, her pace somewhat slowing. Why had those martial artists gathered here? Concentrating her spiritual energy to her ears, she could faintly hear the dialogue of a few people downstairs. In my opinion, that was not the arrival of the demon day and night. That was clearly the secret territory coming into being. Our sect has already ascertained that it's in Song Mountain, so this time we must be faster than the other families. Once we get the secret territory's magical item, our sect will certainly be able to become Jinling's #1 sect. What is the use of this Jinling country's group of trash? Even a few nascent soul stage martial artists can't be found here. The hidden treasure is ours, the country is beyond. Chapter 164. At the base of Song Mountain? Hidden treasure? Wasn't my courtyard exactly at the base of Song Mountain? If all the high-level martial artists proceeded towards Song Mountain, then the safety of Wet Nurse Chen and the others. Hushi's complexion changed slightly, and not in the mood to eavesdropping anymore. Her pace suddenly accelerated as she headed downstairs, rushing as fast as lightning towards her courtyard. In the blink of an eye Hushi reached the base of Song Mountain, discovering that as expected, martial artists swarmed the surrounding area, forming a large crowd. But fortunately, many people probably felt afraid of this secret territory with a hidden treasure, so at this point, most were still busy preparing manpower. What alarmed Hushi the most, though, was that she momentarily couldn't find her own courtyard. It hadn't been razed to the ground, leaving only ruins for everyone to see. Rather, there was now an ordinary meadow where the courtyard had originally been standing. It was impossible to tell that there had previously been a building there. Just when Hushi was starting to be overcome with worry and bewilderment, her ears suddenly heard Shijia's pleasantly surprised voice. "Miss, you've finally come back." Hushi turned her head, noticing a sweat-covered Shijia approaching with a relieved expression. Once a proud-looking man, he now cut a sorry figure. His body was covered with dust, sweat dripped from his forehead, and his eyes were somewhat red. He was almost crying tears of joy when he saw her. Hushi quickly stepped forward and asked, "What happened? What about the courtyard? Are Wet Nurse Chen and the others still safe?" Shijia nodded repeatedly, and pointing at the original position of the courtyard, he said, "Miss, don't worry, the courtyard is still there. Shaoli used her smokescreen technique to conceal the place. Only a martial artist of foundation establishment stage and higher will be able to find it, as long as they gather their spiritual energy to their eyes. When so many martial artists suddenly came here, we were really afraid we were going to be found, but fortunately, Miss, you came back." In the beginning, Shijia and the others had regarded Hushi as a man. After all, female cultivators were rare in Miluo continent, preferring instead to get married. Therefore, they didn't doubt Hushi's gender at first. But later, after staying in the courtyard for a while, seeing and experiencing Hushi's methods and abilities, they immediately discovered that she is a woman. Yet to them, it was irrelevant. Being able to follow such a master is the greatest luck of their lifetime, so as for whether their master is a man or a woman, they really didn't care. All of them firmly believed that one day, Master's radiance will shine in front of all the martial artists in Miluo continent. After listening to Shijia's words, Hushi used her spiritual eyes, and sure enough, she discovered that her courtyard stood perfectly fine in its original place. It was only then that she heaved a sigh of relief. This was beyond her expectations. Shaoli actually had this kind of ability? She was able to use her smokescreen technique to deceive martial artists below foundation establishment stage? Hushi hurriedly rushed to the courtyard, where Wet Nurse Chun and the others were anxiously waiting for news from her. Once Wet Nurse Chun saw Hushi, she was almost crying as she rushed over to her. Examining Hushi up and down, she then wiped her tears. "Miss, how could you do this? Risk your valuable self if you were to die, in the future when I go to the Underworld. How could I explain this to Madam?" "All right, Wet Nurse, don't cry. In the future, I won't do this again." Hushi helplessly repeated this to appease Wet Nurse Chun, while inside, she felt a burst of warmth that she hadn't felt for a very long time. In this shabby courtyard there were people that worried about her, cared about her, trusted her, and they treated her genuinely. For her rely on their trust, this is a feeling that she had never experienced before. Obviously she has a bunch of cumbersome people shadowing her, but she wasn't sick of them in the slightest. Instead, she was full of hope for this life. Chapter 165. Nine-tailed Fox. When Hushi inspected her surroundings, yet didn't see Shaoli, she couldn't help but ask in surprise, "Where's Shaoli?" It can be said that whenever she returned home, usually Shaoli was the first person to pounce on her, acting like a spoiled child. After hearing her question, Wet Nurse Chen's face immediately changed into a grateful, yet worried expression. "Miss, you wouldn't know this, but it was thanks to Shaoli's actions last night that we can now be safe." But after that she shut herself in her room, and no matter what we say, she still refuses to come out. "Miss, you better go and quickly see her." Last night, after Hushi had left to distract the assassins, Shaoli, Shijia, and the others had been worried about Hushi, so they secretly snuck back into the courtyard. However, they didn't even see the single silhouette of a person in the courtyard. They only found Hushi's room filled with blood and an unfamiliar man's body. On one hand, they were frightened of someone breaking into the courtyard, while on the other hand, they were anxious about Hushi's safety. They didn't dare leave, so they could only wait in the courtyard, hoping that they would be able to see Hushi's safe return. Who would have thought that when they were waiting, the spiritual energy in the surroundings would suddenly riot? Normally, The spiritual energy at the base of Tsang Mountain is scarce, so even the spiritual energy vortex couldn't spread to here. Yet unexpectedly, the originally desolate Tsang Mountain suddenly experienced a strange change. And a portion of tremendous power caused rare beasts to stampede down from the top of the mountain. Out of all the beasts hiding in Tsang Mountain, a great number of them flowed like waves as if they were chased by something, frantically fleeing in disarray. And that portion of tremendous power pouring down from the top of mountain also spread to their small courtyard. The moment it almost came into contact with the edge of the small courtyard, Li Si and several others' puppets, as well as other servants waiting outside, died instantly without a peep, blood dripping from every pore in their body. Just when everyone in the courtyard was in imminent peril, Xiaoli suddenly used up all her spiritual power to form an empty spiritual barrier, keeping them all safe in the courtyard. Although the force of stampeding beasts only lasted for a moment, in order to maintain the empty spiritual barrier, Xiaoli ended up vomiting out a big mouthful of blood. Afterward, she shut herself in her room and refused to come out. Hushi arrived alone outside of Xiaoli's room and knocked on the door. "Xiaoli, it's me, can you open the door?" In the room, the low sound of something banging could be heard, but soon after silence. Then a soft sobbing sound was faintly heard. Hushi's brows furrowed slightly, and gathering her spiritual energy into her hands, she placed them on the door, lightly pushing on it. Soon after, the tightly closed door easily opened. Walking into the room in large strides, she saw Xiaoli crouched in a ball on the corner of the bed. Wrapped up in a quilt, not even her head was revealed, her small body trembling incessantly. Hushi shut the door and walked slowly to the bedside. "Xiaoli, come out and speak to me." Xiaoli's body shook inside the quilt, and she tearfully said, "Miss, don't come near me, I'll scare you, Hua. I don't want Miss to hate me." Hushi frowned, wanting to remove the quilt. But just as her hand was about to meet the quilt, Xiaoli quickly dodged. With her body still shaking, her weeping became even more sorrowful and despair-filled. Yet just when Hushi felt helpless, Dandan's childish voice sounded in her ears. "Mother, mother, I smell a nine-tailed spirit fox's scent. Is a nine-tailed spirit fox's meat delicious? Mother, roast it for me to eat?" Nine-tailed spirit fox? Hushi startled when she heard this, immediately recalling the information recorded in the All Living Things record. The nine-tailed spirit fox is one of the ancient beasts. The fox's body is strong and full of vitality. Each time it advances, it will grow another tail. Each tail possesses one kind of magic power, and once it grows all 9 tails, it will have the power to turn the world on its head. Chapter 166. The ancient beast. Each tail of a 9-tailed spirit fox is more valuable than any treasure. After it has achieved 6 tails, it will be a treasure all martial artists yearn for. Although the 9-tailed spirit fox is an animal, it possesses the ability to perfectly transform its appearance. They caused a great threat to humans, so they were gradually all exterminated. They are currently extinct in Miluo continent. Dandan said it smelled the scent of a 9-tailed spirit fox, and other than herself, there was only Xiaoli in this room. So does that mean she is the 9-tailed spirit fox? Hushi was astonished, yet she kept hearing Dandan making noise about wanting to eat 9-tailed spirit fox meat, so she unhappily said, "This is your sister, Xiaoli. If you once again say that you want to eat 9-tailed spirit fox meat, don't ever think I'll make food for you to eat in the future." Dandan's voice choked off and he didn't dare make a noise again. He felt aggrieved as he said, "Mother, don't be angry. Dandan won't eat 9-tailed spirit fox meat. Mother, quickly go and prepare food for Dandan." Hushi's gaze once again landed on the trembling Xiaoli as she gently asked, "Xiaoli, you're a 9-tailed spirit fox?" As Hushi finished speaking, Xiaoli lifted the quilt to look at her in surprise. "Miss, you knew." Just as Hushi glanced at Xiaoli, she spotted a long furry tail behind her, the color of its fur a pure silvery white. Under the light it appeared mysterious, noble, and beautiful. Xiaoli's expression suddenly stiffened, her eyes revealing her despair and fear. "Since you know, miss, please kill me and take my tail. Rather than being killed by other people's hands and suffering torment, I would rather die in Miss's hands. Take it as a repayment for saving my brother's life." "What would I do with your tail?" Hushi glanced at Xiao Li in boredom. Make a fur coat? Xiao Li's eyes widened, the distress on her face transforming into a blank look. Miss you didn't know? A nine-tailed spirit fox's tail is a precious treasure, if you take it and sell it. What nonsense are you talking about? Hushi sneered. You're my servant, I own you. If you were sold, then wouldn't I suffer a big loss? You think I'll go through with such a detrimental business transaction? Hushi's mouth was speaking in a disgusted manner, but in her heart, she couldn't help but celebrate. What kind of good luck is this? She just randomly helped heal someone on the streets, yet unexpectedly, she ended up bringing back an ancient beast. Ha! Though she didn't know what beast her brother is, could it be that he is a male fox? Having heard what was said, Xiao Li became dumbfounded. Staring at Hushi in a daze, she saw that her expression was indifferent and serene. Neither greed, desire, or loathing was evident, miss. She really didn't regard her as different. In Mrs. eyes she is still the same Xiao Li, still her little servant girl. Her heart finally relaxed from the despair and fear that had plagued her for a day and night. Xiao Li pouncing into Hushi's arms as she wept and wailed. She had been really scared. Before she came to this mortal world, her brother had repeatedly warned her thousands of times, telling her that by all means she mustn't let humans discover her true form, or else she would be taken advantage of and skinned. She even once heard the birds personally talk about a member of her fox clan being boiled alive by humans. And afterwards, once he had died, they peeled his skin and tail off intact. Chapter 167. Lost a tale in Xiao Li's small heart. She knew there were good people amongst the human race, but still a larger amount of bad people. Especially when they found out the secret about her body, then no one could hold back. However, ever since she's followed Miss, she's become more like her Miss, like this family. So last night she plucked up her courage and risked her secret being discovered to prop up the empty spiritual barrier, saving all the people in the courtyard. The empty spiritual barrier is a technique that belongs to nascent soul stage martial artists, but with Xiao Li's current cultivation base, she was only able to maintain it for a very short time before she surpassed her limits. So for her to maintain it, she had to sacrifice one tail, which she had cultivated with great difficulty. She now couldn't do anything to maintain her complete human form again. So this night, she hid in her room in fear that Miss and the others would find out her true identity, drag her out, and sell her off. However, the fact is that Miss and the other human beings here were really different. Xiao Li and her brother really didn't trust the wrong people. Hushi felt a headache starting as she looked at the little girl who had thrown herself into her arms weeping and gasping for breath. Seeing Xiao Li wipe her tears and mucus on her clothes, Hushi wanted to kick her. How can one or two of her people always cause her such trouble? Still, watching the little girl's red and swollen eyes, her weak and frail body, she somewhat couldn't bear it. In regards to yesterday's large calamity, if it wasn't for Xiao Li, the whole courtyard would have long been destroyed, and Hushi would have regretted it for sure. Xiao Li had used an ability that surpassed her strength, so certainly she's received a lot of injuries. Seeing this little girl being so pitiful and adorable, if she wanted to cry and wipe her face, then so be it. Hushi helplessly comforted her. Once she saw that Xiao Li's crying had almost stopped, only then did Hushi push her away. Alright, have you cried enough? Let me help you examine your injuries. Xiao Li wiped at the tears streaking her red face, swishing the white tail behind her as she mumbled. Miss, don't worry, I'm all right, I only lost one tail, that's all. She said only losing one tail isn't serious? It was known that the nine-tailed spirit fox is an animal defying the natural order of things, and that those that advance in rank can also have heaven-level problems. Losing one tail meant that she couldn't maintain her human form, so this time Xiao Li's loss is really big. Hushi's eyes softened, and extending her hand to touch the little girl's face, she softly said, Anyway, this time you've saved everyone in the courtyard. I owe you a favor. Thank you, Xiao Li. The blush on Xiao Li's face deepened. Her eyes were as bright as the stars in the night sky, and grabbing Hushi's arm, she shyly smiled as she said, Miss, I'm so happy I'm able to know you, and that I'm able to stay by your side. In this world, there is certainly no nine-tailed spirit fox as lucky as I am. Black lines appeared on Hushi's forehead, Silly little girl, since when did you learn to use such sweet speech and honeyed words? Pursing her lips, Hushi hid the amused expression in her eyes and said, As for your strength, you can rest assured. I will help you to regain it. In the future, I will certainly find a way to help you advance. As she finished speaking, she took out a bottle of spirit spring water from her space, lightly saying, This is water concocted by myself to help you replenish your spiritual power. After you drink this water, you can at least maintain your human form. To help replenish spiritual power, there is nothing able to compare to the spiritual spring water in her space. Unfortunately, she is unable to reveal the existence of her space to people. And moreover, the spiritual energy of the ninth secluded spirit spring is extremely strong, so it's not easy to conceal it. So, after being cautioned by Nangongyu, she used a strong medicament with a concentrated amount of spiritual power, and then diluted it with the spring water. This resulted in the spiritual spring water, currently within Xiao Li's hand. Chapter 168. Courtyard Protection. This kind of spiritual spring water, although its level of replenishing spirit power can't compare with the ninth secluded spirit spring water, compared to the accumulated spirit pill, ordinary spiritual spring water is much stronger. But this way the smell of the ninth secluded spirit spring water was completely covered, so she didn't need to worry about the existence of her space and the ninth secluded spirit spring's water being discovered. Xiao Li took the spiritual spring water and drank a few mouthfuls of it. In a short time she felt clearer. Her entire body that had been lacking spiritual power suddenly started to rapidly recover. Once she finished drinking all of the water in the bottle, the tail on her back slowly shrunk, then disappeared without a trace. Her pale and sallow face also becoming brighter. Xiao Li held the bottle, wishing there was still more. Licking a corner of her mouth, she quietly said, Miss, what is this water? It's so good. Hushi easily threw her another big bottle, and lightly said, If it's tasty then drink it slowly. Once you've finished drinking it, come out and accompany me to inspect this courtyard's protection. After a series of things happening these last 2 days, Hushi was now deeply aware that the safety of this courtyard is too low. She must find the time to reform it, especially because of the strange changes in Song Mountain recently. On top of that, a large group of martial artists had come to Song Mountain, and Xiao Li's smokescreen technique wasn't a guarantee that they wouldn't be found. Although with her current financial situation, she was now able to purchase a better house in Yanjing City for everyone to live in. But firstly, this side of Song Mountain was peaceful and Hushi liked that there was no sign of human habitation. Secondly, since she first arrived here she had felt that Song Mountain is a piece of treasured land. Whether it is training Shijia and the others, or the future fortification, Song Mountain is her best choice. As for the thin spiritual energy, she has her space and spirit spring. Shijia and the others weren't walking a traditional martial artist's path, so in regards to the amount of spiritual energy, she really didn't care. Hushi took out the All Living Things record that Old Man Shumi had left for her, and flipped through its pages till she reached the spell formation chapter, reading it carefully. Because the All Living Things record is mainly an introduction, there were no detailed instructions on high-level spell formations inside. Nevertheless, Old Man Shumi had still written down the methods and theories for some simple and ordinary spell formations. From it, Hushi found one type that was fairly practical, and combining it with Xiao Li's smokescreen technique, it would be able to form some protection over the courtyard. In this way, if a martial artist used spiritual eyes, they still wouldn't be able to find a trace of the courtyard. Even if they walked around it, they would automatically detour past. If a gold core stage or higher martial artist intentionally investigated, they might vaguely detect that something was wrong. Although this protection couldn't be regarded as absolutely foolproof, the need for some sort of protection was urgent. On top of that, Hushi also had many things she must do, so for the time being, she couldn't find a better spell formation. Moreover, the most urgent thing now is for her to gather all the withered spiritual plants in the city. After all, those withered spiritual plants were just waste material for other people, but for her, they were a hard-to-describe treasure. Hushi dispatched Shijia and the others to go out, telling them to use any method they could to collect all the spiritual plants from every courtyard in Yanjing City, and along the way. Especially those from influential families. Almost every family has their own medicinal field, so they probably have large amounts of precious spiritual plants. Even though the spiritual energy in them had completely vanished, and they couldn't grow anymore, the basic medicinal efficacy still existed. If she could get these plants, she would be able to completely improve the physical condition of Wet Nurse Chun, Shi Jia, and the others' bodies. Oh, of course the most important part is that she wouldn't have to spend a cent. Shi Jia and the others left in the morning, returning in the afternoon. Every one of them carried a huge sack on their backs, only, their complexions weren't good at all. Chapter 169. Medicine Delivery. Hushi's brows wrinkled slightly, a light as sharp as a sword flashed in her eyes, while her mouth indifferently said, "These are enough. As for those foolish people's words, you don't need to take them seriously. One day you will let them know who is waste and who is trash." Shi Jia and the others' eyes suddenly shined. The depression and humiliation lingering on their faces immediately swept away, and they nodded at Hushi. Just at this moment, Hushi's ears heard Qinglong's voice. "Princess, this subordinate is at your courtyard's gate. There is something I have to discuss with you." Hushi was surprised, her figure flashed, and she abruptly appeared outside. Qinglong's cultivation base had already reached the peak of Gold Core stage. So long as he was determined to explore, of course he could easily discover the courtyard. But even though he found the courtyard, he couldn't easily enter. He could only wait outside and transmit his voice through the smokescreen technique. Once Qinglong saw Hushi, he promptly hinted at his subordinates to come out. There were dozens of Hell King Manor's bodyguards, each carrying 2 big bags. One by one, they placed them in front of Hushi. Hushi's eyes widened in astonishment, because without her opening the bags and looking, she could already smell the scent of medicinal herbs. Qinglong bowed as he spoke. Master heard that Princess was collecting withered spiritual plants, so he ordered this subordinate to gather all the withered spiritual plants from every large influential family, as well as from the imperial palace. I hope Princess accepts it. For a moment, Hushi didn't know what she should say. Nan Gongyu, this guy was obviously still ill, but unexpectedly, he still knew her each and every move. Without waiting for her to open her mouth and ask, he helped collect the medicinal herbs for her, and sent it to her door. These spiritual plants. A lot of Hell King Manor's manpower and physical resources must have been spent on it, right? Qinglong, however, quickly interrupted her. His voice was laced with proudness as he said, "If Hell King Manor wants spiritual plants from every family, let alone withered, even if they were still healthy, every family will still obediently send it. Master only needed to send out a notice, and every house sent several bags by themselves. Princess doesn't need to worry about being inconvenienced." "Qinglong, you sure you haven't come to provoke my people who collected medicinal herbs from door to door? Even being driven out? Your overbearing prince is simply too hateful." Hushi's mouth twitched. "Help me to thank Nan Gongyu. Also, I'll go to Hell King Manor tomorrow morning for his second stage of treatment." Hearing this, Qinglong's eyes lit up and he quickly bowed. Then, "Thank you, Princess, for your trouble." Finished speaking, he left with his group of people using flying swords. He was the Hell King's personal bodyguard, an expert of Gold Core stage, and using his distinguished identity, he brought these piles of medicinal herbs. Wasn't it in order to specially get this message from Hushi? Believed that when he returned and his master heard this information, he would certainly be happy. With this large amount of medicinal herbs, Hushi quickly wrote out several new prescriptions, instructing Xiao Li and Wet Nurse Chun to go prepare them. These prescriptions were to help Shi Jia and the others to temper their bodies, and there was also one to help Wet Nurse Chun heal. After a period of training Shi Jia and the others, whether in strength or temperament, they had already made quite an improvement. When they wore black clothing for practice, their appearance reminded Hushi of her past organization members when they were training. Shi Jia and Shi Mao experienced the most rapid growth out of all of them. Their strength had already firmly reached the 9th rank of Qi refining stage, and as soon as they completed this stage of body tempering, they would be able to reach the peak of Qi refining stage. Next, they would start to advance to foundation establishment stage. But because their practice method was unusual, there were no cultivation records available at the market. So for the time being, Hushi had not yet found a way to help them advance to foundation establishment stage. Chapter 170. Revival. As for wet nurse Chen, after she used this period of time to nurse her health, the clog in her meridians gradually cleared, while her aged complexion also became a little younger. And this time, after using medicinal baths and silver needle treatments to help allow her to resume cultivating, she slowly entered Qi refining stage. Unfortunately, for her to return to her previous cultivation stage, it would still take a long time. After all, wet nurse Chen's cultivation base had been crippled for too long. After she had finished dealing with the medicinal ingredients that were needed to treat wet nurse Chen, Shi Jia, and the others, Hushi returned to her room to enter her space. Since Shi Jia and Nangong Yu had both collected withered spiritual plants, she now had too much. She had so much that it would last her a very long time, so Hushi brought the bulk of it into her space, preparing to categorize it. However, she had barely entered her space when she was surprised by the scene inside. Noticing Dandan's plump body crouched in the ancient rhyme spiritual field, she watched as it used its short hands and legs to diligently dig small holes, planting the withered herbs. Hushi was about to tease Dandan that it didn't have any common sense, as how could the withered plants live again? After all, once dead, the spiritual plants would need to be grown from a seed again to be alive. Yet before her smile reached her eyes, she was shocked to discover that the dried herbs that Dandan planted into the ground suddenly restored themselves back to green, and at a speed visible to the naked eye. With branches and leaves gently swaying, it looked completely full of life. Hushi rubbed her eyes. She simply couldn't believe what her eyes were seeing, and thought it was perhaps just her fantasy. However, once she turned around, she realized that the spiritual plants behind Dandan were also alive. And not only that, every stalk was green and lush, full of vitality. How could this be? Could it be that the ancient rhyme spiritual field was capable of bringing spiritual plants back to life? This is really too nature-defying. Dandan raised its head and saw Hushi. With surprise etched across its face, it used its short legs to run to Hushi, then hugged her leg as it acted like a spoiled child. "Mother, I was too bored. You haven't come to play with me in ages. Right, did you bring me something delicious?" From the storage ring on her finger, Hushi took out a roast deer leg for Dandan. Seeing it swallow it clean in one big bite, she then picked Dandan up and used her finger to point at the now filled with green spiritual field, asking it, "Did you plant these?" "Yes, isn't Mother happy I sorted it out?" Dandan nibbled on the end of its small hand as it laughed foolishly with an adorable grin. "Mother, isn't Dandan well behaved? Did I help you? Dandan, you're really great." Hushi was calm on the outside, but inside, she was overjoyed. Kissing Dandan's small and tender cheeks several times, she said, "Dandan, you can continue to sort it all out. After you finish, Mother will reward you with a large table full of delicious food." Dandan had just eaten roasted deer leg and wished to eat it again, so when it heard what was said, it immediately laughed happily. With eager strides, it used its small short legs to run back to the field for more planting. Hushi felt curiosity prick her heart. Picking up the stalk of a withered spiritual plant, she then dug a hole and planted it. However, while she expected the spiritual plant to live again, it did nothing. The withered herb was still withered, giving off no sign that it would live once more and become green. Hushi looked at Dandan in shock. "Dandan, how could this be? How was it that when Dandan planted the herbs they were able to live again, but when she did it, nothing happened? Could it be that it wasn't because of the ancient rhyme spiritual field, and rather, it was because of Dandan?" Dandan touched the small antennae on its head, its face confused. It then raised its claw and touched the dried herb that Hushi planted. The next moment, that small stalk of withered herb that had lacked vitality, suddenly revived in front of her. Chapter 171. Mystical. Dandan. Hushi couldn't believe her eyes, so she tried another 3 plants. She even tried watering the withered spiritual plants with a little water from the 9th secluded spirit spring, but they still remained withered, completely devoid of any intention of giving her face by living again. Hushi helplessly gave up on rejuvenating the plants. She was already certain that Dandan is a mystical being, while she is just a normal human. It was better to not challenge supernatural events. Dandan sensed Hushi's disappointment, and with a deadpan expression, it patted her shoulder. Trying to comfort her, it gave her a look that clearly read, "Mother, don't be sad," causing Hushi to not know whether she should laugh or cry. Touching Dandan's small antennae, she cunningly said, "Poor Dandan, I can't do anything to help you. I have no choice but to leave it to you to plant the rest of these spiritual plants." Dandan looked at the large pile of withered herbs beside it. Its smiling face immediately transformed into one of tears, and with its small antennae hanging down, its grievances were plastered all over its face. Hushi couldn't help but laugh. Now, don't feel wronged. I was about to prepare food for you and you can eat until full. Will this do?" When Dandan heard this, its tears finally turned into laughter. With renewed vigor, it returned to planting its pile of withered plants. And so, since she couldn't help with the planting, Hushi entered the spirit firmament palace and began collecting food ingredients. After the master and pet pair had heartily eaten, Dandan continued transforming the withered plants back into usable spiritual plants. Meanwhile, Hushi started harvesting the already ripe spiritual vegetables and spiritual fruits in her space, cooking them into delicious food. Looking at the spirit firmament palace filled with spiritual fruits, a thought flashed through Hushi's mind about brewing wine. One must know that the value of spirit wine was very high. Coupled with diluted spirit spring water from the 9th secluded spirit spring, the brewed wine would be extraordinary. Hushi buried half of the wine jugs in the spiritual field and placed the remaining portion of jugs in the 9th secluded spirit spring. In her previous life, she had also once brewed wine and placed it in the spirit spring. Back then, after 3 to 4 days, she had discovered that the brewed wine was a success. Moreover, after only brewing for such a short time, the spirit spring wine, compared to wine brewed in the real world for a few years, had a far richer taste. Now that the spirit spring had been promoted, the quality of the wine would have certainly increased. As for the spiritual field, the previous spiritual field was barren and filled with sandy soil. Due to this, she had never even considered burying wine in it before. But now that the ancient rhyme spirit field's spiritual power is rich, it might be possible that the quality of the wine will greatly improve, and she wanted to give it a try. However, what Hushi was unaware of was that growth rate of the ancient rhyme spirit field had increased 100-fold. It was now not only effective to the spiritual plants planted on top, it also affected the spirit wine buried below. And so, when she finally went to uncover the spirit wine, the fragrance of the wine was almost potent enough to intoxicate all the beasts on a mountain. Hushi was totally dumbfounded. Of course, this is already way more than she could have hoped for. The next morning, Hushi left the courtyard early to go to Hell King Manor. Compared to yesterday, the amount of martial artists at the base of Tsong Mountain had now increased. Their expressions were filled with anxiousness, determination, and excitement. The ranks of the martial artists from last night had varied between Qi refining stage and foundation establishment stage. Today, there weren't any Qi refining stage martial artists to be seen. Instead, it was all groups of soldiers who were either foundation establishment stage or meridian stage martial artists. And many of the clothes the martial artists were wearing were of the same design, clearly indicating that they were from the same clan. Fortunately, they all gathered on the west side of Tsong Mountain, while Hushi's courtyard was on the east side. Coupled with the proper camouflage, no one had yet noticed the existence of her courtyard. However, there was a lot of curiosity in Hushi's heart. In the end, just what had happened inside of Tsong Mountain that it could make so many martial artists rush here? Once her business with Nangongyu was concluded, she was determined to investigate. After all, here is where her headquarters were located. If there really was a secret territory, Hushi would feel that she had failed if she let others discover it before herself. With the morning sunshine just starting to warm the top of Hell King Manor's glazed tile roof, Hushi arrived before the door of the manor. At this point, she was wearing a white moon brocade robe. With a jade crest in her hair, it showed off the elegant and refined facial features of her disguise as a man. Her skin was exquisite, just like porcelain. Long shapely eyebrows were above phoenix eyes that seemed to radiate an inner light, while her lips were the red of ripe cherries. She was obviously dressed up as a man, yet she still attracted the gazes of people on the road. Chapter 172. His Highness Third Prince. Many people watching felt their hearts quiver. Some even stopped paying attention to where they were walking and crashed into walls, thinking, how can there be such a beautiful man in this world? If I could have him, even if I had to become gay, I would still be willing. Hushi had barely arrived before Hell King Manor's gate, when she noticed that it was surrounded by a crowd of people. In the lead, there was a young man and a woman. The man was wearing brocade robes, and standing straight and tall, he cut an imposing figure. While the woman had cherry red lips and bright white teeth, her appearance beautiful and delicate. As they were standing by the gate, they were arguing something with Hell King Manor's butler. After the three had argued for a bit, rage was clearly visible on the young man's face, and suddenly raising his voice he shouted, "Butler Nan, don't be mistaken. We are here by Royal Father's order to come and visit Hell King. It was an imperial edict. But now that the princess and I have personally come to visit, we're turned away at the gate. Who do you think we are? You're just a mere insignificant slave. Yet you dare defy imperial decree." Hearing this, Hushi was somewhat surprised. She hadn't expected that this man and woman would actually be Jinling Kingdom's prince and princess. But now, a kingdom's prince and princess visiting by imperial edict had unexpectedly been refused entry. It clearly showed that Nangongyu's status in Jinling Kingdom is very high. Hushi clicked her tongue and shook her head as she looked at the uncle blocking that man and woman's way. This uncle, known as Butler Nan, looked about 40 years old, and while he appeared refined and gentle, in reality, he was actually an expert gold core stage martial artist. Hushi once heard Qinglong say that Butler Nan, apart from Nangongyu's 8 bodyguards, was Master's most trusted confidant, and that all of the manor's internal affairs were handled by him. As Butler Nan was being questioned, his face was neither servile nor overbearing, and he laughed lightly. "Your Highness Third Prince is taking it too seriously. How can we defy an imperial decree? It's just that recently our prince hasn't been in good health, so it's inadvisable for him to meet guests. Please forgive me." The third prince knew that Butler Nan wasn't giving him any face, and he flushed in anger. Yet when he thought of Hell King's influence, he repressed his resentment and glared at Butler Nan with a dark look as he spoke. "You know what our identities are, what power we hold. We are here to visit Hell King. Yet you all actually dare to refuse us?" This third prince, Shangguan Rui, is the brother of the current crown prince and born of the same mother, the empress. He's currently Jinling Kingdom's second prince, the son of the first wife, thus it is clear that his status is one that deserves respect. Throughout all of Yanjing City, whoever meets Shangguan Rui is respectful, and they try to curry favor with him. They all look upon him as the honorable prince, but only this place, Hell King Manor. It's the first time someone hasn't paid him any attention, not even letting him enter with his royal father's decree. Humph. Wait until royal brother becomes the emperor in the future. First thing he would do is eradicate Hell King Manor. The third prince's eyes flashed with cold killing intent, but a businesslike smile still stayed on Butler Nan's face, though a trace of disdain was hidden within his eyes. "That's correct. Master has ordered that without his permission no one is allowed to enter and disturb him. Third prince and princess, please forgive me." What he didn't say out loud was that let alone the prince and princess, even if the crown prince and the emperor himself were to come, he also wouldn't let them enter. As long as Master doesn't want to meet with people or do things, then even the emperor would have to step down. At the third prince's side, his hands clenched into fists, and a cracking sound could be heard. Still, while he could restrain himself, the woman beside him was beyond angry and loudly shouted, "You're just a slave, a dog. I demand that you inform your master that Princess Jinyu has come. Do you hear me? As long as brother Yu hears my name, I'm certain that he'll let me in." Chapter 173. Princess Jinyu. Butler Nan lightly laughed. "My apologies, princess. This subordinate has already announced your visit to Master, but Master's order is, that he still won't see you. Impossible. How could brother Yu not want to see me? Princess Zhenyu was so angry her beautiful face turned red, her eyes full of rage. This is definitely because of you, you old man. You didn't tell him clearly. Quickly go back in and announce my arrival once again. Disgust and contempt flashed in Butler Nan's eyes. Yet on the surface he politely said, Princess Zhenyu, did you still not understand? Master's intention is that he doesn't want to see anyone for the next few days. It doesn't matter who it is, they still can't meet him. Of course, this also includes you and His Highness Third Prince. Princess Zhenyu stared blankly in shock when she heard what Butler Nan said. Her long shapely eyebrows raised, and pointing her finger at Butler Nan, she cursed, Wretched dog, who gave you the guts to speak back to us? Believe it or not, I'll report this to Royal Father when I get back. He'll cut your dog head off. Shangguan Zhenyu is a princess born of the first wife, the Empress. Since childhood, she had always been arrogant and willful. She refused to learn any skills, remaining ignorant and incompetent. However, she liked to dance with swords. But still, she had no innate talent, so even though the Emperor and Empress found a lot of talent-enhancing treasures for her, they only helped her to barely advance to the middle of Qi refining stage. Since she grew up worshipping strength, when she first saw Nangongyu in the gardens behind the Imperial Palace, she was startled. After that, she kicked up a fuss about wanting to be married into Hell King Manor. Unfortunately, there's no way Hell King would ever look upon such an idiot. Therefore, these past few years, this princess who was spoiled by the Emperor had become the joke of everyone in Yanjing City. Butler Nan's face remained emotionless, completely devoid of anger or happiness. Only the clear contempt in his eyes gave away what he was feeling as he indifferently said, Please do as you wish, princess. Princess Zhenyu pulled out the sword on her waist, and a swish could be heard. But just as she was about to rush forward and give this rude old man a lesson, she was stopped by the third prince. Zhenyu, don't be rude. The third prince's complexion was also somewhat gloomy, but he understood Princess Zhenyu's temperament, and he was very clear on what the outcome would be if they went against Hell King Manor. Even though they were extremely angry, they had to endure it. Otherwise, it could hinder royal brother taking his position as the next emperor. The third prince turned his head towards Butler Nan, showing a tolerant and refined smile. Zhenyu is still young, so she's not sensible. Butler Nan, please don't be bothered about her. We came on behalf of the Emperor and the Crown Prince in order to visit His Highness Hell King, not to create a disturbance. Unfortunately, Royal Sister is impatient, and as a result she has offended Butler Nan. Please help us convey our goodwill to Hell King. Butler Nan slightly smiled as he nodded. Of course. Princess is a treasure of this kingdom. How could this slave dare to hold a grudge against her? Even though his words were humble, his speech and demeanor, however, were not the slightest bit respectful. Far from being servile, his countenance was one of haughtiness exclusively displayed by the people from Hell King Manor. As for the crowd watching this scene play out, they also felt that it was inevitable and to be expected. His Highness Hell King had alone managed to beat back the magical beast's army. So even if it's the prince and princess that came calling, so what? Without Hell King's protection, let alone Jinling's imperial family, all of Jinling Kingdom would have long been destroyed by the magical beast's troops. Hushi's heart lamented over Nangongyu's unique and unparalleled position in Jinling Kingdom. Then, slightly moving her feet, she unhurriedly walked towards Hell King Manor's gate. Butler Nan noticed Hushi approaching from the corner of his eye, and his formal smile instantly changed into one of enthusiasm and pleasant surprise. Quickly stepping forward, he started to say, Prin. Hushi shot him a glare, and the intelligent Butler Nan promptly corrected himself, all while smiling. Prince has already been waiting for a long time at the water pavilion. Young master, please follow me. Hushi nodded, yet just as she went to follow him, she heard the somewhat gloomy voice of the third prince call out from behind her. Hold on. Butler Nan, didn't you say that His Highness Hell King didn't want to meet with guests? Then why is this boy? Chapter 174. Since when does who I am concern you? The third prince hadn't finished speaking, when he suddenly saw Hushi's appearance as she turned around. With his voice lodged in his throat, he completely stiffened in place. There's often an ancient description of a beautiful man that went as bright as the sun and moon, like a lone pine standing on the edge of a cliff, with a graceful bearing and refinement matching the most exquisite jade. At the time, the third prince would scoff when listening to these words, rejecting the thought of a man ever being compared with a delicate and beautiful woman. But now, seeing this youngster before his very eyes, he became stunned, like he lost his soul. If those ordinary and vulgar people from his residence were to be arranged in front of this youngster, the difference would be like a pearly white cloud compared to mud. The angry look on the third prince's face immediately vanished, his expression changing into one of a refined and warm spring wind. In his hand, a fan suddenly appeared, his countenance confident and elegant. This humble one is named Shangguan Rue. If I may ask, what is young master's name? Did you come here to visit Hell King? Stunned by the youngster's peerless beauty, the crowd had momentarily forgotten how to breathe. But when they heard the third prince's question, they returned to their senses, their hearts full of doubt. A moment ago, when the third prince and Princess Zhenyu had requested to meet with Hell King, Butler Nan's attitude towards them had been neither cold nor hot. Not only that, even when Princess Zhenyu had drawn a sword against him, Butler Nan hadn't reacted in the slightest. Yet suddenly, towards a mere youngster, Butler Nan's attitude was like that of a completely different person. His face had always been refined and formal, but now a smile had lifted his cheeks enough to form wrinkles. In the end, who is this youngster? Hushi saw the third prince's sudden dramatic change in behavior, his pretentious prick-like attitude making her teeth ache. Without paying any attention to him, she turned around to leave. Butler Nan's eyes were cold as he glared at the third prince. This is the princess that master fancied, their Hell King Manor's future madam. Whoever it is that dares to covet her would be damned. Stop! At this moment, Princess Zhenyu, who had been stunned by Hushi's appearance, sobered, and walking forward 3 steps, she blocked Hushi's path and arrogantly asked, "My third royal brother asked you a question. Didn't you hear him? Who are you? Why can you enter Hell King Manor?" Although this juvenile was handsome, when compared to Nan Gongyu's appearance, although he wasn't inferior in any aspects, Princess Zhenyu's heart wasn't swayed. Instead, indescribable loathing and jealousy were all she felt. Hushi sneered, lazily glancing at Princess Zhenyu from the corner of her eye. "Since when does who I am concern you? Brazen. Do you know who I am?" Zhenyu pointed at Hushi's nose as she cursed. "How dare you talk to me like that? Believe me, I will get people to." Hushi slapped the finger away that was being pointed at her nose, laughing coldly. "Oh, really pitiful, she's even forgotten who she is. If anyone present knows who she is, they better hurry up and do a good deed by informing her. If the mind isn't stable, then you should avoid leaving home and being a public disgrace. Go back and remember to tell the doctor to give her brain medicine." You dare." Zhenyu's complexion turned purple with her anger, her body trembling. Everyone watching heard what was said and couldn't help but laugh. However, they didn't dare be too impudent and restrained their amusement due to her status as a princess. As a result to restraining their laughter, their expressions distorted and their bodies violently trembled. Ordinary people were afraid of Princess Zhenyu's status, but the guards of Hell King Manor and Butler Nan were nowhere near afraid of her status. So without restraint, the corner of their mouths turned up, and although they didn't make a sound, their eyes clearly showed their ridicule. Chapter 175. The mysterious young master. Before Princess Zhenyu lost all rational, the third prince couldn't bear it anymore and stepped forward. Then, with a calm and collected face, he asked, "Butler Nan, what's the meaning of this? Didn't you say that Hell King wasn't allowing anyone to visit? But why is this young master able to? Don't tell me you think our royal face is something that you can trample on as you wish?" Although this youngster's beauty accelerated the third prince's heartbeat, the attitude of Hell King Manor really infuriated him. Moreover, when he used his divine senses to examine this youngster's cultivation base, he discovered that he was only at chi refining stage. Even if this youngster had some sort of background, how could he compare to him in Zhenyu? Hell King Manor unexpectedly fawns on such a low-level martial artist. Yet they would lock their door and refuse to see them. Looking down on imperial power like this was the last straw. Thanks to Dandan's help, Hushi had currently set her cultivation base at Qi refining stage in case people were to examine her. The reason is very simple. In the future, when she used her spiritual power in front of acquaintances, her lack of a cultivation base would attract suspicion. And since the advancing speed of her actual cultivation base would shock people, she had decided that Qi refining stage would be good for the moment. Having heard what was said, Butler Nan's face didn't change as he replied. Third Prince likes to joke. Master has said that young Master Shi is equal to the people of Hell King Manor, and that at any time he wishes, he is able to freely enter and leave Hell King Manor. He is not in the category of visitor. If Third Prince doesn't have any other matters, please allow this old slave and young Master Shi to be excused. Finished speaking, and without looking at the Third Prince and Princess Zhenyu's complexions, Butler Nan and Hushi quickly entered Hell King Manor. And after Butler Nan and Hushi entered, the gate closed immediately. The bodyguards guarding outside the entrance displaying a cold look to indicate for people to stay away, completely ignoring the prince and princess. Shangguan Zhenyu firmly shook off Third Prince Shangguan Rui's hand, furiously saying, Third brother, why did you stop me? Clearly that old slave was deliberately making things difficult for us, and not letting us in. On top of that, there's that unknown boy. He actually dared to ridicule me in public. Wait until we return to the Imperial Palace. I'll send people to properly teach him a lesson. Zhenyu, enough. Shangguan Rui coldly cut her off. Then with a calm face, he turned around and walked over to the waiting carriage. Shangguan Zhenyu had an undisciplined temper, but in fact, she was actually completely foolish, unaware of how high the sky reaches and how deep the ground lays. Hell King Manor considers everyone beneath their notice, and yet the Shangguan family hadn't dared to make a move against them. Why? Because Hell King Manor held a huge amount of power and influence, so if they wanted to, they could pull down the Shangguan family and take over as the emperor. In Miluo continent, it was the strong who were respected, and the weak who were prey to the strong. In this country, it wasn't necessarily the emperor who held the most authority. It was usually a very large sect. Especially those old martial artist fanatics that reached nascent soul stage or higher, they only needed to move a finger, and they would be able to move mountains and drain seas. Forget ordinary armies. Whole households could be destroyed. So why would they defy the strong? So even if he was unwilling, the Third Prince didn't dare be rash towards Hell King Manor. And it wasn't just him that didn't dare, no one had the courage to go against Hell King Manor, not even royal brother and royal father. At this moment, Shangguan Rui's mind was occupied with remembering that beautiful youngster. Young Master Shi? Since when has there been a young Master Shi in Yanjing City? How come he didn't know about him? However, no matter what this person's status was, his and Hell King's relationship certainly wouldn't be simple. If he was able to entice young Master Shi, or even control him, then wouldn't he be able to learn some of Hell King's secrets? Chapter 176. To find it easily, Shangguan Rui's eyes flashed bright, and turning to a guard at his side he commanded, Go find information regarding all the youngsters with the surname Shi in Yanjing City for me. I want to know who that boy is. The subordinate quickly accepted the order and left, leaving only the angry, stomping, and cursing Shangguan Zhenyu behind with Shangguan Rui. Shangguan Rui turned to glance at his sister and coldly snorted, a trace of disdain visible in his eyes. This royal sister was doted on by royal father till she had become incompetent. She even had delusions of marrying Hell King. If she continued this way and went out of control once more, she will surely fall heavily one day. I just hope she doesn't ruin the hard work that royal brother and I have achieved. At this time, the spectating crowd realized that nothing worth seeing would occur anymore and gradually dispersed. No one noticed that hidden in a shady corner of the street, a hawker dressed in plain gray clothing was fixedly watching Hell King Manor's gate. The hint of a smile appeared at a corner of his mouth, and soon after he released a paper crane into the air. After a moment, the paper crane turned into a stream of light and landed in a courtyard. Sitting in the courtyard, there was an old man wearing white robes. The old man took the paper crane, and once he glanced at the information written on it, his face immediately flushed with excitement. After having traveled far and wide looking for something, it was found so easily. He hadn't expected that the young genius doctor they had been searching for more than a month would actually appear by himself. Moreover, he appeared to be connected with Hell King. Although Hell King's involvement will make things a bit complicated, but for that secret meridians technique, his Jiang family would do everything possible to grasp control of this youngster. The old man burnt the paper crane in his hand, and after pondering for a moment, he abruptly said in a low voice, "Quick, tell Xie Chongming to come meet me." A subordinate accepted the order and rushed to comply, and not a moment later, Dr. Xie arrived still dressed in his refining robes. Without waiting for Dr. Xie to open his mouth and inquire what was wrong, Elder Jiang had already begun to quietly speak. "The boy that caused you to kneel in defeat has already been found. You know what you should do, right?" Dr. Xie's expression hardened, strong hatred present in his eyes. But quickly covering it up, he lowered his head in a bow and said, "Elder Jiang, please rest assured. This subordinate will certainly discover that boy's secret meridians technique, and I will personally present it in front of you." Hushi had barely entered Hell King Manor when she saw Qing Long, Bai Hu and Wu Yu walking together towards her to welcome her. Following behind them was the fourth-ranked doctor from yesterday, Old Qiu, who had discussed the jade fire toad with Hushi. After confirming that Nangong Yu's safety wasn't in danger, Wu Xian and Xian Wu had returned to their respective posts. So at this time Qing Long, Old Qiu, and the others' attitude had changed 180 degrees when they saw Hushi. They now treated her the same way they would a bodhisattva. Old Qiu's face was filled with confusion as he asked Hushi, "Princess, this old man honestly can't figure out why the withered spiritual plants, that are devoid of spiritual power, can still have a healing effect, completely unlike a medicinal pill. Princess, what method did you use to neutralize the Yin congeal grass cold energy? Yesterday this old man kept trying to think of it until my head hurt. Yet I was unable to come up with any methods. Princess, your medical skills are miraculous." "Stop." Hushi's face stiffened and she interrupted his chatter. "Can you stop calling me princess? Nangong Yu and I are not in the kind of relationship that you imagine us to be." Hearing that, everyone standing nearby paused. After staring at each other in dismay for a good long while, Qing Long finally coughed quietly while his eyes avoided looking at Hushi. "Princess likes to joke. All of us here in Hell King Manor have already personally witnessed your relationship with Master. Especially on the night the vortex appeared, when we opened the door of Master's room. We all saw you and Master." Chapter 177. Wu Yu lacks integrity. Qing Long hadn't yet finished speaking, but Hushi was already blushing. Without hearing any more, she could easily guess what this group of people had seen. And at this moment, she really wanted to find a hole to bury herself in. Bai Hu, however, thoughtlessly smiled. "To address you as Princess is Master's order. If Princess has an objection, you can talk to Master. Oh, by the way, Master has been waiting a long time for you in the water pavilion. Princess, please quickly go." "Do you think that there is any use to complain about it to him?" Grinding her teeth, Hushi removed a box of food from her space and handed it to Bai Hu. "This is the meal that your honored master ordered yesterday. Quickly send it to him. I'll go and prepare the herbal medicine that will be needed later." Bai Hu didn't dare take the box. Instead, he took an exaggerated step backwards, waving his hands in denial. "Princess, please spare this subordinate. If Master sees that the one who enters isn't Princess, and rather it's this subordinate, he will skin me alive. Princess, you should quickly go and personally deliver it. Master will definitely be happy to see you. Maybe it will help speed up the recovery of his condition, and he will quickly get better too. As for dealing with the herbal medicine, Old Qiu has already mastered it, and is willing to help Princess, right Old Qiu?" "Yes, yes." Old Qiu stroked his beard, beaming at her. "It's an honor for this old man to be able to help Princess." Hushi's heart became depressed, yet with no excuses left, she turned around and walked towards Nangong Yu's water pavilion. At this moment, Hushi was still carrying the box of food in her hands, and because she had moved, the aroma of the food permeated the air. As Wu Yu watched it all play out nearby, he couldn't help but breathe in deeply. What is this smell? Wu Yu craned his neck towards the box of food, constantly trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was inside. His gluttonous behavior caused Bai Hu to burst into loud laughter, and patting Wu Yu's shoulder, he said, "This is Princess specially prepared spiritual food. Its delicious taste can be compared to the delicacy of a jade dish. I even dare to say that although you've sampled fine foods from all over the world, it absolutely can't compare with the food Princess makes. Once you've tried it, you'll never crave any other food again." As one of Nangong Yu's subordinates, and as one of the 4 ferocious beasts, Wu Yu was positioned at Gluttonous House. All it would take is for someone to see his post to know that he has a hobby dedicated to eating fine foods. So when he heard Bai Hu, the longing in his heart grew extremely difficult to endure. Blinking his eyes at Hushi, Wu Yu suddenly resembled a small loyal dog trying to act cute. Hushi froze when confronted by his foolish eyes. Was this still Gluttonous House's impressive-looking young master, Wu Yu? His foolishness was practically on the same level as Bai Hu's. The most depressing part, though, was that this guy continuously circled around her, and as he jumped about, he repeatedly shouted, "Princess! Princess!" It was like the noise of a devil, piercing her ears, and Hushi was itching to slap this buzzing fly away. Even Qinglong couldn't stand watching this display, and holding his forehead, he wished he could just drag this shameless guy out of Hell King Manor. However, he understood Wu Yu's character. Usually he was careless and leisurely, not paying much attention to anything, but once he cared about something, he would fight to the death for it. And Wu Yu's cultivation base, while it wasn't particularly high, by some odd twist of fate nobody was able to match him in skill. Even himself and Bai Hu wouldn't be able to subdue Wu Yu. Ultimately, Hushi couldn't do anything about his pestering, and withdrew another box of food from her space. As she threw it at him, she coldly said, "Just this once, never to be repeated." Wu Yu caught the box of food. Breathing deeply, a rich fragrance assailed his nostrils, and immediately his eyes shined brilliantly, making him look like a child eager to devour the entire box of food. Chapter 178. Let them get used to it first. Hushi helplessly shook her head, hearing Dandan's protesting voice as it said, "What mother doesn't love Dandan? It won't matter if you give the delicious food to the big brother that you play kissing with, but why did you also give it to other people? Obviously that was Dandan's. What? Mother doesn't love Dandan anymore. What is this brat talking about?" Qinglong soon brought Hushi to the water pavilion. At this moment, the fire crystal in the water pavilion had been removed, and surrounded by ventilation, with the wind blowing and causing the gauze to flutter. It seemed cool and comfortable inside. Hushi had barely entered the water pavilion when she noticed Nangong Yu sitting by the bedside, wearing only a white satin robe. Half of his long hair was draped over a shoulder, while the other half was tied up with a silver-braided tassel rope. Watching him from the side, she could only see the high and straight bridge of his nose, refined and handsome facial features, and his transparently pale complexion. Hushi and Qinglong had obviously entered the room, but it seemed as if Nangong Yu was completely unaware. With his slightly drooping long and thick eyelashes, his whole countenance appeared weak yet beautiful. Abruptly, a trace of indescribable pain was felt in Hushi's heart. She didn't like seeing this man looking so frail. He should be high-spirited and overbearing. Yet in order to save her, he had now become so weak. Hushi gently knocked on the door. It was only then that Nangong Yu turned his head, and seeing that it was Hushi, his cold countenance very quickly melted into one of a gentle and soft smile. "You've come." His tone was flat and nothing special, but it contained deep happiness and expectation, making Hushi's heart beat wildly in her chest. Composing herself, she walked forward while carrying the box of food. Soon, one of the servants that served in the water pavilion walked over to take the box of food, arranging everything in it on the table. When the smell of the food spread throughout the room, no matter how trained these servants were, they couldn't help but take deep breaths in. Swallowing the saliva pooling in their mouths, they restrained the longing on their faces with difficulty. Because the people of this world were unaware of the existence of seasoning, many people that ate spiritual foods were only concerned about its spiritual energy, and at most they only ate sweet and salty things. So when they ate Hushi's specially cooked food, they simply didn't dare to believe that food could ever have such a great taste. That's right, ever since Nangongyu had eaten Hushi's food at her home, he had began to ask her for packages of food without any sense of shame. And so the people in Hell King Manor were now more or less experienced with something called delicious food. Even though they weren't able to taste it, just seeing the color, smell, and spiritual concentration, coupled with Baihu's high praises, they knew that the food was of the highest quality. And when they were cleaning up the dishes, their fingertips would be stained with sauce, causing them to feel extremely hungry. Alas, if only Princess would marry into Hell King Manor, she could then teach at least 1/10 of her cooking skills to the manor's kitchen. It would be great. Prince and Princess, please enjoy the meal. Hushi all of a sudden returned to her senses, the word princess, echoing loud and clear in her ears. She couldn't help but say to Nangongyu with a low voice, "Since when did I become your princess? You should make it clear to your subordinates. Tell them to not call me princess again. Later on, they can just call me Shiyu." Nangongyu used his chopsticks to carry some food into his mouth, and while enjoying its fragrance and taste, he laughed lightly. "Since she heir will be my princess sooner or later, is it wrong to let them call you that earlier? It's good to let them get used to it first." Chapter 179. Compensation. Hushi's mouth twitched as she said, "Who says I will become your princess sooner or later?" Nangongyu raised his eyebrows. "You don't want to?" Hushi glared at him. "We've barely known each other for a month." "Right, we've known each other for a month, but we've embraced as well as kissed. She heir, we already have such a close relationship. Yet you have the heart to say that we're only strangers?" Hushi's forehead filled with black lines. What is he talking about, embracing and kissing? Clearly I was being forced. Nangongyu leaned closer to her ear and asked, "She heir, are you unwilling to become my princess? To become my legitimate wife?" The man's warm breath fanned against her ear, and with his exquisite face so close to her, Hushi could feel her heart jumping in her chest and her face slightly blushing. This isn't a problem of being unwilling or not. Nangongyu immediately beamed with joy. "Ooh, then it means you want to? Since she heir is willing, then the rest isn't a problem. I'm very happy that we agree." "Who's agreeing with your opinion?" Hushi's long shapely brows frowned due to her anger. Since when did this man become a scoundrel? Clearly the first time she met him he had the manner of a ruthless and handsome tyrant. Nangongyu swiftly switched positions, moving closer to where Hushi was sitting. He then gently placed his hands on her slender waist. "All right, my princess, now can you accompany me to eat? You see, I've had your dishes specially lined up for you. Yet you haven't touched any at all. Are you ignoring me?" When the watching servant saw their master's completely peaceful countenance, totally opposite to his usual behavior, their eyes widened till they nearly popped out. They gazed at Hushi like they were seeing a rare creature. Princess indeed is the princess. They had never seen their master pamper and act so lovingly to anyone like this before. Hushi could feel herself being watched by the servants, causing her ears to turn red. Casting an angry glare at Nangongyu, she said, "Get your hands off." "No," Nangongyu replied, like it was only to be expected that he could touch Hushi. "Princess and I will be eating like this in the future. We have no need for you to serve us. You can all withdraw for now." The servants heard the order and promptly complied. With them hurriedly retreating, soon, only Hushi and Nangongyu were left in the room. Nangongyu said, "This way, no one will disturb us. She heir, you don't need to be shy anymore." "Who is shy?" "You're shy, your whole family is shy." Hushi was fuming. She really wanted to kick this shameless man. Nangongyu immediately changed his tone to one of grief. "She heir, we clearly came to an agreement yesterday, and I wanted to see you as soon as I opened my eyes. I've been waiting for you since early this morning. Shouldn't you compensate me?" Hushi recalled that scene from before she left yesterday, and she couldn't help but blush. "Who told you to wake up so early? Don't tell me that because you might wake up in the middle of the night. I also have to keep watch over you at all times?" "That's a good idea." Nangongyu's eyes lit up. "Indeed, you're my princess. Living in this manner with me is only proper. Someone come." Hushi anxiously covered his mouth. What are you doing? Nangongyu grabbed her small hand, and holding it in his palm, he innocently said, ordering my people to arrange a room for you. Arranging one beside my bedroom would be good, or perhaps you would prefer to share the same bed with me, Shi-er? That's exactly what this king has been waiting for. Hushi noticed that he was becoming more and more outrageous, and quickly interrupted him. Enough! What crazy things are you thinking about so early in the morning? Hurry up and let me go. Nangongyu not only didn't let her go, instead he encircled her waist with his arms, tugging her closer to him. I can let go, but I've been waiting since early this morning. So Shi-er, you must compensate me. Chapter 180. Men and women shouldn't touch. What compensation do you want? Give me a kiss. Hushi's mouth twitched. Dream on, didn't you ever hear that men and women shouldn't touch? Men and women not touching only refers to people that are unrelated, right? Nangongyu smiled as he said, You're this king's wife, how can it be possible that we aren't related? Not to mention, we've already kissed and embraced. As he said this, he leaned forward and brought his face closer with an expression of, I'm ready on it. Hushi wanted to laugh at his shameless. She really didn't know if this was his true character, or if it was because his illness had muddled his brain. Who is related to you? Stop imagining your love is reciprocated and showering your affection on an uninterested party. I'm not interested in you. Nangongyu faintly laughed. He wasn't the slightest bit angry. Instead, he only flicked the tip of her small and exquisite nose. Hypocritical girl. All right, if you won't kiss me, then I'll suffer loss and kiss you instead. Finished speaking, he held Hushi closer, leaning in to kiss her cherry-red lips. In response, Hushi pushed him away as she dodged, but who would have thought that once she pushed him, Nangongyu would fall from his chair. And as he fell, his head knocked against the corner of a table, causing a loud bang to echo throughout the room. Hushi was stunned. She hadn't expected that the usually strong and overbearing Nangongyu would fall with only one push. In fact, she had actually forgotten that her cultivation base was on the 8th rank of foundation establishment stage, while Nangongyu's body had been suffering for the last 3 days, causing his strength to be limited. When Qinglong heard the loud noise from his position outside the room, he worriedly pushed the door open. Glancing around the room, he noticed his master was unconscious on the ground, while Hushi was standing still with a look of bewilderment on her face. With such a scene before him, Qinglong had suspicions as to what might have happened, but even if he wasn't sure, he was angered to think that Hushi would unexpectedly cause his master to once again sustain an injury and lose consciousness. Thinking till here, his body immediately burst with cold power. You only came here to examine Master's condition, right? No matter how much Master provoked or irritated you, was it enough for you to toss him aside? Don't forget, Master is only in this condition right now because he saved you. Qinglong had always been habitually silent. This was the first time that he had become so mad, he would start shouting out of control. For them, Master's safety was the most important thing. But Qinglong had barely finished scolding Hushi when he bowed his head, his gaze meeting his master's serene and deep eyes. The emotion in his eyes flashed with a cold light, clearly projecting the words. My princess is someone you can scold? Are you courting death? Qinglong felt the veins on his forehead twitch, cold sweat immediately sliding down his back. The next moment he could feel his 3 views one cracking. No. His 3 views had started cracking ever since his master had first met Miss Naylan. He never could have thought that his master would be willing to beat him to death over a woman. However, Hushi was unaware of the secret communication happening between the two. Qinglong's snarls had made Hushi become distraught with anxiety, and quickly walking forward, she went to examine Nangongyu's condition. At this moment, Qinglong tactfully moved over for Hushi, purposely helping his master to adjust his position, and allowing him to be able to lean closely on Hushi's bosom. His job as Hell King's personal servant really isn't an easy one. Hushi held Nangongyu's hand, and began to examine him. Yet the more she probed for his pulse, the more anxious she became. There were no wounds on Nangongyu's body, but his breathing was becoming extremely weak, his pulse erratic, and his veins were weakening. Hushi was flustered, and although she didn't want to admit it at this moment, she was really very worried about this man. She was so flustered that it mixed with fear that he really would leave her. It was so bad that even though she was trying to treat Nangongyu, she was no longer able to maintain her usual calmness. 1 literally means 3 views and most commonly refers to one's view of the world, life, and values. Chapter 181. You deceived me? From her space Hushi took out a set of silver needles, and tearing open Nangongyu's clothes, she revealed the muscles on his strong chest. Her small warm hands lightly touched the acupuncture points on his chest, inserting a series of needles in his heart veins. Suddenly, she heard Nangongyu's deep and low voice in her ears. I didn't know that she is such a kind person. Hushi stared blankly, and suddenly lifting her head, she saw a loving smile upon Nangongyu's face. Although his complexion was still pale, his eyes were bright with emotion. Wasn't he unconscious and dying just moments before? You deceived me? Hushi glared at him in disbelief, her eyebrows frowning. This scoundrel. Just moments ago she had been worrying in vain. And yet he had even gone so far as to make his pulse unsteady. This hateful man had actually deceived her. Hushi stood up with a cold expression on her face, and turned around to leave. Nangongyu pulled on her hand to stop her. Don't go. Originally, if Hushi had wanted to shake off his hand, it would be very easy, but Nangongyu had unexpectedly used the small amount of spiritual power that remained within his body. He had so little spiritual power left that his hand was icy cold, the life force within his body becoming extremely faint. You're crazy. Quickly stop using your spiritual power, and let me go. Do you want to die? No, not unless she promises me that you won't go. Hushi's face revealed her anxiousness, and afraid that if he continued it really would become life-threatening, she promptly said, Okay, I won't go. With this, Nangongyu finally released her hand, the trace of a shallow and weak smile at the corners of his mouth. Is it that difficult for you to admit that you have feelings for me? Finished speaking, his eyes closed, and this time he really did lose consciousness. Hushi remained standing in place, staring blankly at Nangongyu's sleeping face. When the expression on his face remained unchanged, she finally released a long sigh. Although Hushi was angry that Nangongyu had lied to her, she also knew his current state wasn't too optimistic, so she had to pay attention and save his life first. She got Qinglong to prepare a room full of hot fire crystals containing spiritual power, prepare a wooden tub filled with hot water, and arrange the treatment room like yesterday. The medicine this time, compared to a few days ago, was a bit different. Originally Nangongyu had no longer needed to increase the amount of medicine, so Hushi had agreed to let old Chiu make it. However, who told Nangongyu to court disaster by using his spiritual power. Without any choice, she removed a porcelain bottle from her space, pouring 1/3 of the medicine that she had just made not long ago into the bath. This porcelain bottle is something of little value or interest compared to a magical tool, and she herself didn't know where she got it from. It was only able to hold a very limited quantity of solid items, yet it could contain several tons of liquid. The medicinal liquid inside was prepared by Hushi in her space last night, during her free time. It used an extract from the spiritual herbs that Dandan had brought back to life by planting. Then it was mixed with water from the 9th secluded spirit spring, and the resulting medicine was 1,000 times more potent than yesterday's. But an ordinary martial artist's body wouldn't be able to bear it, so originally Hushi hadn't intended to use it. Under Hushi's guidance, Qinglong placed Nangongyu into the medicinal bath. Then from the side, he watched as Hushi took out her silver needles, and one by one, inserted them into several of Nangongyu's major acupuncture points. After the silver needles had been placed on Nangongyu, smoke began to rise from his body. The room that had at first been sweltering, now started to drop in temperature due to the smoke. This was because the cold poison within Nangongyu's body was now being forcefully released. Hushi handed the porcelain bottle in her grip to Qinglong. Once the color of the medicinal liquid in the tub has faded, change the water, and pour in more of the medicine in this bottle. Continue this for up to 3 days. and Nangongyu will be able to recover. Qinglong received the medicinal bottle and quickly said, Princess, Master's current state is unstable. I hope that until Master awakens, you can stay here. Chapter 182. Learning to refine pills. He was afraid that when Master woke up and didn't see Princess, that he would be beaten to death by Master. Hushi saw Qinglong's expression, and right away she knew that leaving would be impossible. Besides, it was because of her that Nangongyu was in his current situation, and she had also promised him that she wouldn't leave, so she should stay. Hushi pondered a moment before speaking. Do you have a refining room here? There is. Princess, the reason you're asking for a refining room is to? Didn't Princess say she couldn't refine? Hushi said, bring me there. This time I will stay in the refining room. If there is something the matter, you can find me there at any time. Qinglong was puzzled, but he still bowed in agreement. As long as Princess agreed to stay, it didn't matter what she wanted to do, even if it was tearing down Hell King Manor. Hell King Manor's refining room was top of the line, complete with every kind of tool anyone would ever need. The room was about 20 square meters, with many runes engraved on the walls to help gather spiritual power. In the corner of the room there was an arrangement of shelves. These shelves were made using special materials. Spiritual plants or spiritual beast cores could be placed on top of them, and the spiritual energy wouldn't drain away. In the center of the room there was a gray refining furnace, probably as tall as a person, and shaped with a 3-foot round belly. The surface of the furnace was engraved with all kinds of talismans. In the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, she had read that these talismans were special spells used to help gather spiritual power, greatly increasing the success while refining pills. The higher the level of the furnace, the more useful and complex the talismans would be. Arranged around the furnace were several mats, and against one wall there was a long table and a simple bed. These were to be used midway through refining if the person needed to rest. When Hushi arrived at Hell King Manor she had had a plan, and now she was eager to learn the refining techniques written in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture. Unfortunately, it was too inconvenient to do it in her courtyard, and plus, she didn't have a refining furnace. So since she was here anyway, she came up with the idea of borrowing Hell King Manor's refining room. In accordance with the directions written in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, Hushi began to slowly use her spiritual power. Focusing on fire spiritual power, she slowly condensed it as much as she could, until it finally formed a ball of golden spiritual fire on her fingertips. As soon as the spiritual fire entered the refining furnace, the spells used to gather spiritual power around the furnace began to slowly ignite, gradually lighting up the whole furnace. Hushi wiped the sweat on her forehead, feeling that the single action of forming the spiritual fire had drained almost all of her spiritual power. To help replenish it, she drank a big bottle of spring water. Thinking of how much time and spiritual power went into just being able to condense a ball of spiritual fire, Hushi became anxious. With this little ball of spiritual fire, she would only be able to refine a small amount of pills, and she estimated that they would be second-grade pills at most. However, what Hushi didn't know was that if other doctors could see her actions, their eyeballs would pop out from shock. For a martial artist to achieve condensing a ball of spiritual fire for refining, they would have to at least be gold core stage. For an ordinary martial artist to be able to refine pills, they generally borrowed spiritual fire sources from nature. Yet Hushi, who was currently only at foundation establishment stage, was able to accomplish forming spiritual fire. And not only that, her spiritual fire wasn't the normal dark reddish-brown color. Rather, it was a high-rank light golden color. This was simply against Mi Luo Continent's advanced refining principles. Unfortunately, Hushi was unaware of this, as all of her knowledge on refining pills was coming from the overflowing cauldron pill scripture that old man Shumi had left. What was instructed inside was naturally what she practiced. How would she know that it was universally shocking? And so after replenishing her spiritual power, Hushi took out the spiritual herbs from her space that she had prepared in advance according to requirement. Then, she wrapped them in a layer of her spiritual power and threw them into the furnace. Chapter 183. Refining a supplement spiritual pill because of the spiritual power. The spiritual herbs placed in the furnace were engulfed by the spiritual fire in an instant. This prescription was for the simplest supplement spiritual pill. It was listed as a first-rank medicinal pill, and was the best type for Hushi to practice refining. Gathering her spiritual energy, she opened her spiritual eyes. Using them to then examine what was occurring inside the furnace, she discovered that the spiritual herbs had already begun to slowly mix with the spiritual fire. Unfortunately, they weren't mixing well. Some areas had already melted, while certain areas of the spiritual herbs were untouched. However, if this were to continue, then wouldn't this affect the attributes of the medicinal pill? But if she was able to stir it, then wouldn't it be just like when she decocts her herbal medicine? Thinking this, she focused, and driving her spiritual power into the boiling furnace, she wrapped up the spiritual herbs, and continuously stirred the remaining herbs slowly. And when the spiritual fire wasn't strong enough in some places, she used her divine sense to split her spiritual power. Dividing it into strands, she then poured it into the spiritual fire, so that the herbs were able to cook evenly. This is like when you lit a fire for cooking. When the fire wasn't big enough, that's when you added more firewood. Hushi felt that this was very simple reasoning. Yet this kind of technique wasn't written in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture. However, she thought that perhaps the techniques documented were the only ones ancient doctors could think of to refine medicinal pills. Yet what Hushi didn't know was that this small action would greatly change this batch of medicinal pills' attributes, causing her to be very surprised. After an hour passed, Hushi discovered that the herbs inside had dissolved completely. So after wiping off the sweat on her forehead, she replenished herself by drinking a bit of spring water. She estimated that with this speed, it would take about 2 to 4 hours to complete, eliminating her chances of success. Fortunately, the furnace and the room was filled with strong spells used to help gather spiritual power, greatly reducing the consumption of Hushi's own. Otherwise, if Hushi had to use her spiritual power for a few hours in a row, even if she continuously drank spring water, she still wouldn't be able to maintain that pace. Once another 2 hours had passed, all the spiritual herbs had finally finished fusing, and above the gray furnace a dazzling golden light burst forth. Hushi opened the furnace and a medicinal smell straight away assailed her nostrils, making her feel clear-headed and relaxed. At this moment in the furnace's second layer, there lay a small, finger-sized gray-black medicinal pill. The difference between this supplement spiritual pill and others is that on this gray-black medicinal pill there were thin golden lines. And although they were very faint, they were still visible if you looked carefully. 30 supplement spiritual pills, Hushi sighed. After refining for 4 hours, the result was only 30 supplement spiritual pills. With such demanding work on her mind and body, this was all she had to show for it. If word of this were to reach the ears of other refining masters, their spluttering would be able to drown Hushi. After refining for the first time, and using the most common spiritual herbs, if a furnace producing 30 pills still wasn't enough, then how would that group of people have lived? But when Hushi worked out the cost of the supplement spiritual pills materials, and compared it to how much she could sell the pills for, she immediately beamed with joy. Adding up the cost to produce the spiritual herbs for the supplement spiritual pills, it equaled no more than 10 crystals. So how much were the completed supplement spiritual pills worth? One low-grade supplement spiritual pill would be worth more than 100 crystals, while just one top-grade pill could fetch more than 1,000 crystals. When looking at it this way, spending 4 hours on making them was totally worth it. 3 days passed very quickly. Throughout this time, Hushi studied the overflowing cauldron pill scripture, and practiced refining during the day, while during the evenings, she would meditate in her space and cultivate. Now that 3 days had passed, all the porcelain bottles that she found in her space had already been filled with medicinal pills, and once those were filled, she even managed to find a large jar to store the medicinal pills in. Then, she placed them all inside the spirit firmament palace. Chapter 184. You're awake? In any case, the spirit firmament palace has the effect of protecting the freshness of stored items. No matter what was placed inside, when it's removed, it will still be exactly the same as when it was originally stored. Hushi had now refined a lot of medicinal pills. Unfortunately, all of them were only first-grade pills. When she had attempted to refine second-grade medicinal pills, she ultimately failed due to a variety of reasons. There was a note written in the overflowing cauldron pill scripture mentioning that the intensity and the rank of the spiritual fire would affect the grade of the medicinal pill. So even though she wanted to refine a second-grade medicinal pill, it apparently seemed that the rank of her spiritual fire wasn't high enough, leading to any attempts failing. However, Hushi's failed medicinal pills were different compared to other refining masters' failures. Their failed attempts at refining would end with the medicinal pills crumbling into powder, and the entire furnace exploding. Yet when Hushi's attempt at refining second-grade medicinal pills failed, small round pills still formed. Compared to normal second-grade supplement spiritual pills, these were a little smaller and darker. Hushi thought for a moment. Then she decided to store the failed pills away and research the cause of the failure at a later date. During this period of time, Hushi of course still went to check on Nangongyu's condition. While he had continuously slept for all 3 days, Hushi had continued Nangongyu's treatment of medicinal baths, plus other treatments. And to avoid him being angry, she had continuously drugged him into unconsciousness for those 3 days, stopping his treatments only yesterday. The results of the treatment were better than expected. As sure enough, Nangongyu's body had become stronger than before. So although the effects of Hushi's medicinal treatment was very powerful, to ordinary martial artists, they would find themselves devoured instead of healed. Yet Nangongyu's body had unexpectedly been able to adapt, easily passing through 3 days of treatment. On top of that, the cold poison in his body had dispersed, letting the spiritual power once again circulate in his dantian. Even the injuries he'd previously received in the flame cave were gradually recovering. It can be said that until today, Nangongyu had already completely recovered. But now that he had regained the peak phase of his cultivation base, until the next time the cold poison attacked, he wouldn't need to worry about it. Right now Hushi stood behind Nangongyu and began to remove all of the silver needles from his body. The moment the last silver needle was pulled out, Nangongyu's eyes abruptly opened. Hushi had just happened to move in front of Nangongyu when she suddenly came into contact with a pair of beast-like eyes. Luminous and fiery, they gazed into her eyes, causing her to momentarily stare blankly. "You're awake?" Being stared at with such a piercing stare, Hushi didn't know why her heart started to grow apprehensive. It was as if she was his prey, instinctively making her want to escape. "Then since you're fine, I'll go back." Finished speaking, she replaced the silver needles in her space and turned around to run away. However, before she was even able to turn around, her wrist was gripped tightly by a certain man. The big palm that held her back no longer felt as cold as ice, rather, it was scorching hot, like burning charcoal. Fine beads of sweat formed on Hushi's forehead. "Stop it, what are you doing?" Hushi hadn't yet finished speaking when her body suddenly rose into the air, and since she completely lacked the strength to resist, she was dragged into the medicinal tub. Due to the surprise, Hushi cried out in alarm and felt herself drink a mouthful of bitter medicinal water in the process, causing her small face to pucker up as she repeatedly coughed. "You're crazy. Do you want me to choke to death?" Finished speaking, she used one hand to support herself on the edge of tub while she jumped out. Unfortunately, before she could escape, Nangongyu pushed down on her shoulder with one hand. Then gently pulling her back, he trapped her between himself and the tub wall. "Naughty little thing, choking to death is too cheap for you." Hushi was intimidated by his burning gaze. And because of their ambiguous position, their bodies sticking closely to each other, she could feel her face turning red. Using both hands, she pushed on Nangongyu's chest to create some distance, her face taut with the effort she was exerting as she said, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." Chapter 185. Punishment. Nangongyu smiled evilly, and leaning closer to her, he blew a breath into her ear as he said, "You don't understand? Then wouldn't it better if I helped you to remember? Let's say you first pushed me, making me lose consciousness, and then you even dared to add a knockout drug into my medicine. Xier, Your courage is really growing. Hearing what he said, Hushi's face immediately reddened, her guilty conscience making her turn her face to the side. Stop talking nonsense. You fainting is your own fault. I already told you not to use your spiritual power. And what knockout drug? Do you have any evidence? After saying this, she firmly pushed against the man who trapped her, wanting to slip away. But since Nangongyu's cultivation base had now recovered, she was unable to move him. Her action of pushing him was ineffective. Instead, it only made Nangongyu tighten his hold on her. Hushi suddenly wanted to smash a stone down on her foot in depression. Had she cured Nangongyu only for him to act undisciplined and suppress her? Nangongyu quietly laughed, his muscled chest faintly vibrating. Xier, tell me, how should I punish you? It's me who cured you, you ah. Hushi hadn't yet finished speaking when Nangongyu lowered his head, firmly sealing her small alluring lips. With heated palms, he clasped one closely around Hushi's waist, while the other pressed against her head, firmly confining her in his arms. Once the kiss ended, Hushi felt limp all over, completely pliable in Nangongyu's embrace. Nangongyu's arms encircled her entire body, and lifting up her petite frame, he bent her legs and placed her on his lap. Hushi's translucent cheeks were glowing a peach-like crimson, while her eyes were like black glass, filled with a trace of moisture and a faint purple light. Her small red lips were slightly parted as she gasped for breath, revealing her pink tongue and pearly white teeth. Nangongyu felt his heart tighten, and holding her a little higher, he couldn't help but kiss her once more. This time, the kiss lasted until Hushi was almost faint from a lack of air. At some point her arms had subconsciously wrapped themselves around Nangongyu's neck. It seemed as if her whole body was on the verge of melting. Nangongyu's eyes were flooded with strong passion, and as he lowered his gaze to the girl's captivating black-purple eyes, he could feel the heat in his body surge to somewhere in his lower regions. Xier, if you seduce me like this again, I certainly won't be able to restrain myself and will make you my princess right now. The man's deep and husky voice contained a strong desire, making it feel like he wanted to swallow her entirely. His ink-black eyes had become a scorching red as they intently stared at her. Hushi suddenly returned to her senses, realizing that the two of them were tightly pressed against each other. And since she was sitting on his lap, she could definitely feel the changes occurring with Nangongyu's body. You pervert. Shameless. Hushi immediately jumped from his lap, retreating to the other side of the tub. Nangongyu laughed. I'm shameless, but I'm only shameless to my family, Xier. Who's your family? Hushi absolutely wouldn't admit that there was a trace of happiness in her heart. Nangongyu moved, suddenly appearing beside Hushi and pulling her into his embrace. Xier, don't avoid me, all right? You can't run away, you're destined to be mine. Hushi angrily retorted. Why am I yours? You're more or less mine. Don't forget that you now owe me a favor for saving your life. Once the words were out, Hushi immediately regretted it. Regretted it so much that her intestines were green. Isn't this the same as giving this shameless guy an opportunity? Chapter 186. Forgive my clumsy eyes, it was all because of this scoundrel making her angry. It was his fault that her IQ had decreased. Sure enough, when Nangongyu heard her words, he lowered his head and kissed one of her red earlobes. What Xier said is right. I'm yours for as long as you want. I'm your man. Hushi was just about to retort, when Qinglong's nervous voice suddenly sounded from outside. Master, Ice Lotus Fairy has come to pay a visit. Qinglong knew that his master was currently together with Miss Naylan, so whoever dared to disturb them must be prepared to be skinned alive. However, the person who came is Ice Lotus Fairy, so he had no choice but to inform Master. Nangongyu looked at Hushi, pondering for a moment before he said, I'm occupied at the moment. Let her wait a while. Qinglong peeked inside the room from a crack in the door, and sure enough, what occupied at the moment? Is it taking a bath together with Miss Naylan? Qinglong silently scoffed, yet on the surface he still answered respectfully, Yes, master. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Hushi's distinct voice from inside the room. She doesn't need to wait, he has time now. As Hushi finished speaking, she pushed Nangongyu away while glaring at him. then turned around and pulled herself out of the medicinal tub. Hushi was able to use her spiritual power to quickly dry the clothes on her body. Unfortunately, yellow stains were clearly visible, while there was still a distinct smell of medicine. And although her clothes were now unsightly, she was unable to do anything about it as she didn't have any spare clothes to change into. Fortunately, she was currently wearing men's clothes, so even if she was dressed somewhat sloppily, it wouldn't cause people to pay attention to her on the streets. Once Hushi finished straightening her clothes as much as she could, without bidding farewell, she pulled open the door and rapidly fled the room. The distinct sound of Nangongyu's bright laughter could be heard echoing behind Hushi, causing her to gnash her teeth. Qinglong had thought that he was used to seeing the interactions between his master and Miss Naylan. Yet watching this scene, he became shocked and bewildered. What had Master been doing with Miss Naylan for him to reveal such a rarely seen expression? Hushi accelerated as she fled through the courtyard, continuously using one hand to smooth out the wrinkles on her clothes. While she was passing through the courtyard, a group of people were heading towards her. Hushi didn't want to be delayed in Hell King Manor again. And moreover, she obviously didn't know who these people were, so she intended to just ignore them and leave. Yet just when she had turned around to go down another small path, she heard a tender voice shout, "Stop!" Hushi stopped, and looking over, she saw a delicate and beautiful woman dressed in purple separate herself from the group of people. Placing one hand on her hips, she used her other hand to point at Hushi as she angrily said, "How can you work in Hell King Manor when you don't even know to pay your respects to my young miss when you see her?" Hushi narrowed her eyes and coldly said, "Who told you that I work in Hell King Manor?" As Hushi spoke, everyone's attention was suddenly drawn to her face, and once they clearly saw her appearance, they couldn't help but gasp. This youngster was dressed in old and wrinkled robes, and there was only the smallest amount of spiritual power fluctuations coming from his body. But unexpectedly, his features were so radiant and beautiful, especially his eyes. They were like bright and cold gems, sparkling and translucent. They were piercing with their gaze. Because of Hushi's outstanding features, the woman dressed in purple was stunned and forgot how to momentarily speak. But detecting that Hushi's cultivation base was only chi refining stage, disdain was immediately visible in her eyes. "You're merely a rude boy who's an insignificant chi refining stage martial artist. Even if you're not one of Hell King Manor's people, if you're able to enter and exit here, you ought to know that my young miss's status in Hell King Manor is special. It's only natural that you should pay your respects to my young miss." Hushi simply wanted to laugh when she heard this woman's annoying and stupid words. Crossing her arms in front her chest, Hushi coldly looked at the woman. "Who's your young miss? Forgive my clumsy eyes, but I don't see any important person here that deserves my respect." Chapter 187. Ice Lotus Fairy. The woman dressed in purple furiously said, "My young miss comes from the Feng family. She's the young clan head of the Luli sect, known as the Ice Lotus Fairy. Country bumpkin. Don't say that you don't know that Luli sect is one of the 4 greatest sects in Miluo continent? Even here in Hell King Manor Qinglong, Bai Hu, and the others must respectfully salute my young miss when they see her. It's an honor that a no-name rude boy such as yourself is able to appear in front of my young miss. Yet you actually don't know the difference between good and bad." Hushi slightly narrowed her eyes. She despised it the most when people had such an arrogant manner when speaking to her. If you like to kneel and lick the boots of others, that's your choice. It would be better if you didn't provoke me. The woman dressed in purple didn't expect that after she had explained that this young man would unexpectedly not only not express any fear, his manner would instead become more unrestrained. She couldn't help but be furious as she said, "You know, my young miss not only has an exquisite appearance, she will also be the future princess of Hell King Manor. Since you dare to be rude to my young miss in Hell King Manor, are you not afraid of His Highness Hell King cutting you two into 8 pieces?" The future princess of Hell King Manor? A sharp coldness flashed in Hushi's eyes, while her heart felt like it was being scratched by something. Anger and annoyance surged forth from her chest, making her want to commit murder. But on the surface she only exposed an indifferent smile. "So, as it turns out, it's the future princess. But even if it's Hell King's princess, what does that have to do with me? I'm not one of the people from Hell King Manor. Finished speaking, she turned around to leave. Anger flashed across the face of the woman dressed in purple, causing her complexion to turn an unsightly shade of red, while her body violently trembled. With a swish, she pulled out a long sword, and using the approximate force of a meridian stage martial artist, she rushed towards Hushi to stab her. Hushi's eyes narrowed slightly, and seeing the sharp long sword flashing coldly in the sunlight as it headed straight towards her, a corner of her mouth rose in a smirk. Ziyan, don't be rude. Just as the long sword was about to reach Hushi, a crisp and gentle voice could be heard softly scolding in an imposing manner. Immediately, the long sword headed for Hushi was like a kite with its string tugged. Stopping in mid-air, it soon after floated back to the woman dressed in purple. Ziyan gripped the long sword in her hand, stomping her foot as she said, "Young miss, this rude boy was extremely disrespectful towards you. How can you let him off without teaching him a lesson?" Ziyan's eyes gazed at the crowd, and it was at this moment that it parted. A woman wearing a long white muslin skirt slowly separated herself from the huddle of people. When Hushi saw this woman, she felt like there was something glaringly bright before her eyes. Her appearance was elegant and refined, and with a slender and graceful figure, it seemed like she was so attractive that she didn't belong to the mortal realm, especially with her graceful and noble aura. It made her resemble a flower on a high mountain, too far away to be disrespected and played with. While Hushi was sizing up the woman dressed in white, the other party was also examining her. Studying Hushi's exquisite and elegant face that looked like it was crafted by the heavens, the eyes of the woman dressed in white flashed with a trace of darkness. But when Hushi realized that the woman had only glanced at her for a moment before turning away and dismissing her, Hushi felt like she was just a jumping clown, unworthy of the woman's attention. This kind of arrogance made Hushi very uncomfortable. "Young miss, just let me teach this rude boy a proper lesson, okay?" Ziyan moved to Ice Lotus Fairy's side, half to appeal, and half to act coquettishly. Suddenly, a graceful and arrogant smile appeared on Ice Lotus Fairy's face. "Ziyan, when all is said and done, we're currently in Hell King Manor. Even if you want to teach this rude boy a lesson, it should be up to Hell King Manor's people to undertake it. Isn't that right, brother you?" Chapter 188. An exceptionally pleasing pair of jade annulus. Hearing this, Ziyan raised her head, and sure enough, there was Hell King. With Nangongyu's tall, handsome, and straight figure before them, she immediately became overjoyed and said, "Miss, sure enough, Hell King personally came to welcome you. Only you are lucky enough to receive this privileged treatment." When Ziyan said this, she purposely raised her voice, not forgetting to occasionally throw contempt-filled looks at Hushi. She did this like she was informing Hushi of the offense she had committed towards a respected person. A corner of Hushi's mouth raised as she noticed that Ice Lotus Fairy had already stepped forward. Her beautiful eyes filled with worry as she looked at Nangongyu. "Brother Yu, I heard that you were sick. Are you feeling better now?" The moment Nangongyu saw Ice Lotus Fairy, the expression in his eyes was no longer indifferent. Even his tone became slightly gentler. "Lianing, why did you come here?" Ice Lotus Fairy took out a porcelain bottle as she said, "Eldest brother wanted to discuss something with you, and since I was worried about your health, I volunteered to help him by coming over with the information myself. This is medicine that was personally refined by my master. I think this'll certainly be useful for you." Nangongyu didn't receive it, rather, his fathomless eyes glanced towards Hushi. "No need, I have my personal doctor. Although Zhu Kei's medical expertise is excellent, it can't compare to my master's. Brother Yu, it's better that you accept this medicine. Don't let Xian Air worry about you 1,000 miles away." "It's not Zhu Kei," Nangongyu sneered faintly, yet when he saw the pitiful way Ice Lotus Fairy was looking at him, he gave in and accepted the bottle of medicine. But his stare stayed on Hushi the whole time as she stood not too far away, and he explained, "My personal doctor's skills are extremely outstanding. Lianing, in the future you don't have to worry me." Ice Lotus Fairy followed Nangongyu's gaze, the arrogant and rude boy's figure entering her sight. She frowned slightly. This youngster's cultivation base is only chi refining stage, so how could he be a doctor? Brother Yu, is this your new attending medical doctor? Doctor and attending medical doctor. Although there was only an additional 2 words, their positions were as different as heaven and earth. Attending medical doctors normally had a low cultivation base, and could usually only do unskilled work, such as nursing. They weren't proficient in the fields of refining and treatment, so therefore their status was naturally not high at all. Large common households who couldn't afford a high-ranked doctor would instead hire an attending medical doctor to ensure the health of their family. Ice Lotus Fairy examined Hushy's cultivation base, and upon discovering that she was just a mere chi refining stage martial artist, she naturally suspected that Hushy was just an attending medical doctor. Hearing what was said, Nangongyu laughed quietly, then helplessly said, "An attending medical doctor? I wouldn't trust one. Not to mention, which attending medical doctor would dare to not give their master face?" When the Ice Lotus Fairy heard the loving tone in Nangongyu's voice, her graceful eyebrows wrinkled. This was the first time that she had heard Brother Yu speaking in this tone. Standing at a distance, Hushy watched the 2 people looking at her expectantly and talking softly. Her face was calm and tranquil, completely unmoving. However, her eyes flooded with a cold light. With such a distance, if she were to use her internal energy to eavesdrop, it wouldn't be difficult to understand the content of their dialogue. However, she didn't want to, because this had nothing to do with her. She had originally wanted to distance herself from Nangongyu, wanting to clearly distinguish the gratitude and resentment between the 2 of them, helping them to having nothing to do with each other. Now that she knew he had a future princess, wasn't that good? Watching from a distance, the 2 people were picturesque between the shady trees and blossoming flowers. They resembled a pair of jade annulus, exceptionally attractive. Ziyan's voice suddenly interrupted from the side, filled with pleased laughter. "Boy, do you see it now? His Highness Hell King never lets other people get close easily, but our young miss is an exception. In all of Hell King Manor, who doesn't know that my young miss will become Hell King's future princess? How is it, aren't His Highness Hell King and my young miss very well matched?" Chapter 189. Why are you mad? Hushy indifferently said. Indeed, they're well matched. Hearing this, the smile on Ziyan's face became proud and arrogant. That's good if you know my young miss's status. How can you, such a lowly person like yourself, neglect it? Don't think that just because you can enter and exit Hell King Manor that you can be arrogant and despotic. Ziyan's voice suddenly disappeared with her surprise as she discovered that Hell King was no longer having an intimate chat with her young miss, and was unexpectedly making his way over. Seeing Hell King's handsome face, with his tall and straight figure, both of Ziyan's cheeks instantly blushed. Slightly bowing her head, the corners of her mouth were tinged with the traces of a shy smile. However, Nangongyu didn't pay any attention at all to the existence of Ziyan. Rather, he quickly moved in front of Hushy, reaching out his hand to pat her head. "What are you talking about? Why are you so serious that you were even unaware that this king had arrived?" Hushy subconsciously wanted to avoid Nangongyu's hand, but what kind of person was Nangongyu? Now that his strength was back to its peak, how could Hushy avoid him? As a result, he didn't only caress her head, but had also gently pulled her waist into his embrace. The man's deep and quiet laughter echoed in her ears as he said, "You're still angry?" Hushy was just about to struggle, when all of a sudden her whole body quivered. She could sense a strong murderous aura coming from behind her, as if someone wanted to dismember her body into 1,000 pieces. But this murderous aura only lasted for a moment, because when Hushy turned to find the source, she could only see the Ice Lotus Fairy's expression lightly examining them. The corners of her mouth lifted into a shallow smile. Her face revealed no clues as to where the aura had come from. Hushy frowned and pushed Nangongyu away. "We're talking about the future princess of Hell King Manor. Indeed, such an ideal couple, a match made in heaven." Nangongyu couldn't help but laugh, and lowering his voice, he leaned close to Hushy's ear and softly whispered, "Are you praising yourself? But what you said is right, I like it." Hushy sighed sadly. In the end, does this guy really not understand? Or is he pretending to not understand? Stop acting stupid in front of me. The beauty is over there. Your Highness Hell King, please refrain from teasing me in the future. Nangongyu stared blankly. After their relationship had become more familiar, Hashi rarely called him His Highness Hell King. But when he noticed the sneer on this girl's mouth, and her cold eyes, he realized that she really was angry. But why is she angry? Nangongyu turned his head to glance at Ice Lotus Fairy standing at a distance from them. With his eyes immediately lighting up with realization, he quietly laughed. Are you jealous? Hashi unhappily glared at him. What jealousy are you talking about? You're thinking too much. Just continue receiving your lovable visitor. I'm very busy, so I'm leaving now. Nangongyu pulled Hashi back into his arms as she was about to leave, whispering so that only the two of them could hear. Such an awkward girl. Just admit that you like this king. Is it so difficult for you to admit you feel jealous to this king? Seeing Hashi about to burst, he promptly explained. Mine and Lian Ying's relationship isn't like what you're thinking. Be good and don't think too much, alright? I'll get Baihu to send you back, as I have a few matters to which I have to handle these next few days. The person who hired the Drought Demon organization to kill you still hasn't been found. So during these days you should stay at home as much as possible, only going out if need be. If there is something you need, find Baihu, and you must constantly wear the imprint that I gave you, so I know whether you're safe or not. As soon as I finish dealing with this matter, I'll find you. Nangongyu softly kissed the side of her face, his voice gentle. Obediently wait for me at home, Hashi felt that the surrounding glares on her were so scorching that they felt like they would burn a hole through her clothes. Her face immediately turned red, and she quickly pushed him away again. No need to have Baihu send me. I can go back on my own. Chapter 190. Are you looking for me? Finished speaking. Her feet flashed as she rapidly fled away. Hashi didn't realize that her depressed mood had unknowingly changed into a combination of shyness, annoyance, and relief. With the warmth from Nangongyu's kiss still lingering on her cheek, her whole face unknowingly turned red, spreading all the way to the tips of her ears. As Ziyan watched Nangongyu and Hashi's interaction from the side, her complexion turned green, then white, and she clenched her jaw so tightly that it almost crushed her white teeth. This youngster, although his appearance was elegant, he was still only a man, so how could Hell King be interested in him? Could it be that the rumors were true? His Highness Hell King really had that kind of hobby? He's cold towards women because he likes men? Then what about her young miss? Ziyan anxiously looked at Ice Lotus Fairy, Feng Lianing, only to see that her expression was still as calm as ever. Her beautiful eyes were as tranquil as water while she gazed at Nangongyu. Not even the slightest trace of haziness or darkness could be seen. It wasn't until Nangongyu was sure that Hashi had left his manor that he turned towards Feng Lianing and said, "Let's go, we can go to the study to talk." Obviously had just left, but he was already impatient to see her again. This is the first time that Nangongyu had understood the expression. One day apart feels like 3 years. He really hoped that he would be able to marry as soon as possible. Feng Lianing agreed, then seemingly asked unintentionally, "The young master that just left he's called Shiyu. Since doesn't like people knowing her identity, he would naturally help her to hide it. My personal doctor, and as far as I'm concerned, a very important person to me." While he was speaking, Nangongyu recalled how the two of them were getting along, his eyes turning soft with love and tenderness. Feng Lianing lowered her gaze, her expression hidden in the shadows. After exiting Hell King Manor, Hashi turned to go down East Street, towards the medicinal ingredients store. Although a lot of spiritual plants were now growing in her space, most of them were somewhat valuable, while the remainder were common spiritual plants used for refining. And because she had used up a large amount of spiritual plants and materials when she had been practicing her refining, she didn't have much supplies left and decided to buy the replacements today. After barely walking around the corner, Hashi abruptly sensed a burst of coldness behind her. It seemed that someone was firmly glaring at her with a strong murderous aura. She steadily continued her pace, the trace of a smirk appearing at a corner of her mouth. Someone wants to follow her. Even back when she had no spiritual power, she was still able to sense Qinglong following her, while the person who was following her now was obviously much weaker compared to Qinglong. The next moment Hushi sped up, her figure completely disappearing by a remote corner. Here there was a small shabby alley, and although it was close to the bustling East Street, it was a place where many beggars liked to sleep at night, and was permeated with the stench of unwashed bodies, urine and feces. Because of this, few people ever ventured near. Several breaths after Hushi disappeared, the figure of a woman dressed in white appeared in the small alley. With no mask covering her face, her delicate and pretty facial features were clearly visible. Yet her eyes were filled with killing intent and a touch of surprise. She had definitely seen Hushi enter the alley, but just a breath later, and she had completely lost all traces of her. Obviously she, herself, is at the peak of foundation establishment stage, while the other party is merely a boy on chi refining stage. So how could she have lost him? Just when the woman dressed in white was becoming bewildered, her ears abruptly heard a voice speaking with a cold sneer. "Are you looking for me?" The woman dressed in white was immediately startled, and before her eyes, the youngster's figure very quickly appeared. Under the sunshine, the youngster's skin seemed like sparkling and translucent jade, bright and dazzling. Yet his beautiful phoenix eyes were filled with cold frost, chilling those that saw them. Chapter 191. Earthbound spirit poison. The woman dressed in white felt an indescribable sensation, and couldn't help but quiver all over as she was stared at by those eyes. Immediately after, she realized that the youngster's cultivation base was only at chi refining stage, and she coldly snorted. "Boy, I'll acknowledge that your little trick worked. You were unexpectedly able to cover your tracks. Unfortunately though, you've overestimated your abilities, and if you had escaped a moment ago, perhaps you would have had the opportunity to live. I didn't expect you to be so stupid, delivering yourself to my door. Humph, don't blame me for being ruthless." Hushi slightly raised her brow. "Oh, is that so? So that's to say, you following me the whole way because you intend to kill me? Is she really so easy to bully that people think they're able to come and assassinate her?" The account between Drought Demon Organization has yet to be settled. And yet here comes another one. The woman dressed in white coldly said. "At first the order I accepted was to find out your identity, then to look for an opportunity to get rid of you. But now it seems that I don't have to investigate and can just let you die without a burial place, regardless of your identity and background. Haha. So you want to kill me here? What, now you know how to be afraid?" The woman dressed in white burst out into loud laughter. Unfortunately, it's already too late. As she finished speaking, she began to gather her spiritual power, and bringing out her flying sword with a swish, she flew towards Hushi. The flying sword not only headed straight for Hushi with severe power, but also brought with it an icy cold energy, freezing the air around it into frost as it traveled. The most peculiar thing of all, though, was that the spiritual energy in the atmosphere seemed to be absorbed as the flying sword swept past. This caused the momentum of the flying sword to become fiercer, and so as the flying sword drew closer to Hushi, she also sensed the intense suction of spiritual energy. "Annoying boy. Go die." Spiritual power ruthlessly rushed forwards from the woman's hand, her delicate and pretty features warped into a sinister smile. Yet the moment the flying sword was about to pierce Hushi, stabbing her weak body, the woman dressed in white thought something flashed before her eyes, and suddenly Hushi had already disappeared from her original position. The woman stared blankly, then she abruptly went white with shock, and wanted to recall her flying sword. But the next moment, she found that she couldn't move. With her body frozen with one leg forward, and one leg back, her hands flailed about as she tried to use her spiritual power. This position was very strange and hilarious, yet she was unable to budge even the tiniest bit. The worst part was that she could feel her feet becoming colder and slowly freezing, as if someone was wrapping a layer of mud around her skin. It was at this moment that Hushi's cold voice echoed in her ears. "How is it? Do you still want to kill me now?" Panic flashed across the woman's face, her eyes filling with intense dread. What are you doing to me? Why can't I move?" Oh, this is a type of poison called earthbound spirit poison. I made it for fun in my free time. Moving around to the front of her, Hashi kicked the woman's stiff lower leg, indifferently laughing as she said, "Earthbound spirit poison makes a person's body completely stiff. It's like it becomes possessed by an evil spirit binding them to the ground, causing them to be unable to move a muscle. With time the body deteriorates, gradually becoming stiffer and weaker, until finally, it resembles a stone statue. One touch is all it takes for it to break into a million pieces." The more the woman dressed in white heard, the more pronounced the fear on her face became. She was so afraid that the muscles in her face started twitching. Hashi nonetheless laughed. "But you don't have to worry, earthbound spirit poison solidification is only really effective on an ordinary person's body. For a martial artist, as long as they have spiritual power to protect themselves, it isn't so easy for them to become a stone statue. Earthbound spirit poison will only hinder you from moving for a few hours, that's all." Chapter 192, Squirrel Human Fish. Hearing this, the woman dressed in white immediately released a sigh of relief. Yet before the fear in her eyes could vanish, Hashi continued, "You don't have to worry about earthbound spirit poison, because what you should be worrying about is what I'll be doing to you next." With that, she pointed at the flying sword lying on the ground. Suddenly, the flying sword that had originally belonged to the woman dressed in white leaped into Hashi's hand. Test slicing the long sword through the air a few times, Hashi then lightly tapped the sword's edge against the woman's face. The woman dressed in white felt the cold metal and sharp edge against her cheek, and instantly turned pale with fright. "What are you doing? Is there any woman who doesn't appreciate her own beauty? No woman wouldn't feel scared when their face was being threatened." Hashi coldly said, "Speak, who sent you? If you tell me, I'll leave your body intact." The woman's eyes flashed with a trace of alarm, and she immediately shouted, "Since I'll die anyway, why should I tell you anything?" "Oh, such a courageous spirit." Hashi withdrew the long sword, clicking her tongue as she said, "However, don't you know how many kinds of methods there are to kill people? If you're beheaded, you're dead. If you're skinned alive, you're dead. One long slice across the waist with a sword, you're also dead. Do you really think that dying by these methods is all the same?" The complexion of the woman dressed in white quickly became deathly pale. Hashi had only described simple methods of execution, but the woman was already so scared that her whole body was trembling. Unable to bear it any longer, she yelled, "Don't you know who I am? If you kill me, you absolutely won't be able to escape." Abruptly halting her words, the woman dressed in white firmly bit her lips, refusing to continue speaking. A corner of Hashi's mouth curled upwards. "Do you know what my favorite dish is?" The woman dressed in white didn't understand why Hashi suddenly changed the topic to food, yet not daring to speak, she could only firmly glare at Hashi. Hashi continued speaking, "My favorite dish is called squirrel mandarin fish 1. The so-called squirrel mandarin fish isn't really made with squirrels, rather it's made with fresh fish. First you slice the fish meat into thin pieces without completely cutting them off. Then, you take a spoonful of hot oil and pour it on top. Just listen to the squeaky sounds it makes. It resembles the sounds a real squirrel makes. The delicious and fresh taste that dances on the tip of your tongue. It's a temptation that most top chefs can't resist." The woman dressed in white paled further, while the expression in Hashi's eyes as she looked at her caused the woman's hair to stand on end. Hashi's next words frightened the woman so badly that she nearly fainted. "I know, how about I make you into a squirrel human fish? First, I'll slice the flesh on your body into strips, making sure that the thickness is well distributed so that they won't rip off. Then I'll place you on a big iron plate to grill you, slowly pouring on the hot oil. I've never made such a big squirrel human fish before, but I believe that the taste will be particularly delicious." As she finished speaking, she examined every inch of the woman's skin, mentally measuring up the material she had to work with. The woman dressed in white was so frightened that she almost collapsed, and as she was on the verge of sobbing, her voice cracked as she spoke. You wouldn't dare do that to me." But without waiting for the woman dressed in white to finish shouting, the long sword in Hashi's hand suddenly waved through the air. "Ah!" The woman let out a miserable shriek, tears and mucus streaming down her face. Where before there was smooth skin on her cheek, there was now a thin piece of flesh hanging down to her neck, exposing the tender pink flesh inside. However, what was weird is that even though this was clearly such a big wound, not the slightest amount of blood could be seen oozing out from it. Hashi lightly laughed. You still want to say whether I'll dare to or not? After saying this, she approached and looked at that piece of flesh. Seems that the thickness of the cut isn't well distributed. Since I haven't made squirrel mandarin fish in such a long time, it seems that my hands have become stiff. I'd better try slicing another section. In making this dish, a whole fish is deboned with the fillet still attached to the tail. The fillet is then cut in a crosshatch pattern, and when deep fried, will look like a squirrel in flight. The sauce served with it is sweet, slightly tangy and pleasantly red. Red is the auspicious color for the Chinese, so this sauce is extremely appropriate for the Chinese New Year. It is the signature dish of the premier restaurant of Jiangsu cuisine, known as Su Xiao Xiao. Apparently, a long time ago, an emperor wanted to eat carp, but carp was forbidden by his own laws. Of course, being the emperor, he wanted to get his way and told his chef that his head would be on the ground if he was not served carp. His chef then had to devise a way to make the carp uncarp-like, and using his unmatched kitchen techniques, made the fish to look like a flying squirrel instead. Another legend has it that during Emperor Qianlong's extensive tour of the south, he caught sight of a particularly frisky carp and, delighted by its apparent zest for life, ordered it to be cooked immediately. In an attempt to capture the fish's former joie de vivre, the chef focused on giving it a reanimated look when he fried it. Others say that the origin of the dish's name lies in the squirrel-like squeaks and squeals that erupt from the flesh when hot sauce is poured over it. Chapter 193. Demon. After Hashi finished speaking, she raised the long sword in her hand. The woman dressed in white saw the cold edge of the sword press closer to her, and was no longer able to endure the painful torture and her fear. Her expression collapsed as she shouted, I'll speak, I beg of you to spare me. Then speak. On whose order did you come here to kill me? It was Hell King Manor. The people from Hell King Manor ordered me to kill you. Hell King Manor? Hashi narrowed her eyes. Why would the people from Hell King Manor want to kill me? And which person is the one who wants to kill me? The woman's entire body twitched, and with her eyes slightly flickering to the side, she weepingly said, It was Qing Long. Right, it was Qing Long who ordered me to kill you. Because you're a man, and yet you still dared to seduce His Highness Hell King, ruining His Highness Hell King's reputation. This caused Qing Long and the others to want you dead, so they sent me to kill you. Qing Long wanted to kill her? Because she used the identity of a man to seduce Nangong Yu? This was simply a big joke. Did they think of her as a 3-year-old foolish son? However, Qing Long, Bai Hu and the others, already knew that she was a woman. Moreover, if they wanted to kill someone, they wouldn't send such a trashy person to do it for them. Hashi sneered, slicing another chunk of flesh off of the woman's face. Since you don't want to tell me, then don't tell me. I don't have much interest in who wants to kill me anyway. As a matter of fact, you would be better used as a practice dummy for my knife skills. The flesh on the woman's face, and the flesh on her arms, was sliced off piece by piece. The woman dressed in white let out a sharp shriek filled with misery. Even though this type of injury was common for martial artists and could easily be cured, the process of this torture was really too horrible. The woman thought that the person before her eyes was simply a demon, causing her to experience true fear this time. Who knew what kind of terrible punishment would be waiting for her next? The woman dressed in white finally broke into tears. I'll speak. It was Ziyan who ordered me. Please spare me. Ziyan. For a moment, Hashi didn't react to the name Ziyan. Who is she? Why does she want to kill me? The woman dressed in white wept while saying, I'm Bai Ji. I serve my young Mississippi. Compared to me, Ziyan is a higher-ranked servant as she is young Mrs. Personal Maid. Ziyan said that you were seducing His Highness Hell King, causing our young Miss heartbreak, so she ordered me to kill you. As long as I could accomplish this task, she would request that the young miss raises my status. Hashi's eyebrows slightly pursed. Is your young miss that Ice Lotus Fairy? That's right. The mention of her young miss made the woman dressed in white's face to immediately expose an expression of reverence. My young miss is the Feng family's young miss, born of the first wife. She is also Lu Li Sek's young clan head. Throughout all of Miluo continent, the only one who is fit to partner with Hell King is my young Mississippi. Who are you? You're a man and yet you're unexpectedly so shameless as to willingly lie low under a man's body, even attempting to vainly snatch away His Highness Hell King. I'm warning you, you had better release me this instant, otherwise, my young miss will absolutely not let you off. Okay. The trace of a sneer appeared around the edges of Hushy's mouth. I've heard your warning very clearly. Now as for you, you can go and die already. With her words having barely fallen from her mouth, and without waiting for Baiji to react, Hushy gripped the woman's neck with one hand. Slightly pressing down with her fingers, a crack could be heard echoing down the alley. Baiji's eyes abruptly opened wide, her face filled with horror, and soon, her head drooped down, her neck lacking any strength. She, a second-ranked servant of the Feng family, a martial artist at the peak of foundation establishment stage, in the end was unable to even let out a groan and silently died. Hushy stared at the dead body, not a trace of emotion visible in her eyes. From a pocket near her chest, she then removed a small bottle of corroding bone water, pouring it onto the dead body. Chapter 194. Old Beggar Man. A moment later, the dead body issued sh sounds, followed by clouds of white smoke and a rotten stench that permeated the air. After several breaths, Baiji's dead body disappeared without a trace. After she had finished dealing with Baiji's body, Hushy turned around to leave when suddenly, from behind her, she heard a faint sigh. Such a vicious baby doll. Not even such cruel torture was enough. You even went and destroyed that person's body, exterminating all traces of her. Haha, but whatever, you let me see such a good play. Hushy abruptly quivered all over, then quickly turned around. But once she turned around, it was to discover that there was no one there. It was just an empty alley. Not even a person's shadow could be seen, and yet she had obviously heard someone's voice. Moreover, even though she was releasing her spiritual power and divine sense with all her might, she couldn't sense the slightest hint of another party's existence. How could this be possible? Even if it was Nangongyu standing in the shadows, her highly perceptive awareness would be able to sense him. In the end, just how powerful was this person? Hushy became frightened, however. On the surface she still looked calm. With her eyes tightly scrutinizing her surroundings, she coldly shouted, "Who are you? A person who hides their head and only reveals their tail while peeping on others. Is that decent behavior?" The sound of laughter suddenly echoed throughout the empty alley. And this time, since Hushy was listening very carefully, she discovered that it was the voice of a man. Furthermore, it was the voice of an old man. While Hushy was still bewildered, a figure unexpectedly appeared in front of her out of thin air. It was an old man dressed in rags with messy hair and a dirty appearance. As an indescribable stench wafted from his body, he examined Hushy and laughed. Standing in the alley, he would occasionally take long gulps from a broken gourd bottle in one of his hands. An old beggar man such as this could be said to be a common sight on this street. If he were to mix in with the other beggars lying on the ground in piles at night, no one would be able to detect any abnormalities. But at first glance of this person, Hushy had felt like she was facing an enemy, and was unwilling to let down her guard in the slightest. Because, even with her extraordinary abilities and how she was able to effortlessly determine Nangongyu's rank, she was completely unable to determine the rank of the old beggar man before her eyes. And this old beggar man, not only had he been able to follow her without her realizing, but he had also managed to see through her disguise as a man with just a glance. What made Hushy even more apprehensive was that after Dandan had noticed the old beggar man, he kept shouting at her in a panic from her space. "Mother, I'm afraid." Then hide in the spirit firmament palace and don't dare come out. Dandan's fear, coupled with how she still couldn't sense any spiritual power fluctuations coming from the old beggar man's body, could only prove that the old beggar man's rank was higher than hers. But Hushy's character has always been one that would rather break than bend. Even if she was facing a strong opponent that would end with a fight to the death, she would never choose to back down and show weakness. Therefore, after only being shocked for a moment, she then coldly asked, "Who are you that you've come to fight for justice for her? Were you that woman's partner?" "Baby doll, your looks are very pretty, but how can your eyesight be so bad? Does this old man look like that woman's partner?" Hearing what she asked, the old beggar man became angry. As he jumped around and pointed at Hushi while scolding her, he completely lacked the poise and refinement of a gentleman. If Hushi hadn't known beforehand that he was a high-level expert, she would seriously think that this was just an insane old man. Hushi sneered, peeping from the shadows, following someone, and saying bad things behind a person's back. Those things don't count as decent behavior, right? The old man choked, his beard whipping furiously through the air as he replied, "This old man is clearly an honorable and moral person. How could this be considered as peeping? It's you baby doll's ability that's not decent. Just because you were unable to discover this old man's presence. Why do you have to blame me?" Hushi was too lazy to pay attention to this old beggar man, who seemed like an annoying troublemaker any longer. Since he had no malice towards her, then it wasn't necessary for her to debate with him anymore. Chapter 195. Surprise Attack. Unfortunately, Hushi had barely lifted her foot to walk away when she abruptly felt a burst of coldness coming from behind her. The next moment she sensed a strong force of spiritual power, honed into a sharp blade, heading towards her spine at the speed of lightning. Without time to think, she removed her whip from her space. Rotating her body 180 degrees, she used the momentum of her turn to firmly whip the weapon that was attacking her. A crack echoed down the alley, and the tip of the bone whip scraped against the ground, causing a burst of sparks to fly into the air. However, the weapon that had been attacking her surprisingly disappeared without a trace, only to unexpectedly reappear swaying before her eyes. Hushi's mouth flattened into a thin line. She hadn't expected that it would be a gourd bottle that was attacking her. The gourd bottle was now swaying in the air as it floated before her, occasionally nodding forward, as if it was mocking Hushi for her incompetence. Hushi glared at the old man. "Didn't you just say that you and her weren't partners?" The old beggar man scratched at the louse on his head, and while laughing mischievously he said, "Of course this old man isn't her partner. But you wrongly accused me, baby doll. And if I don't do anything as payback, then how could this old man have any face?" As Hushi's expression sank, she turned around to escape by using her evade technique. Unfortunately, even though her movements were fast, the gourd bottle ended up being faster than her. Practically every time she would try to use her evade technique to leave, the gourd bottle would completely intercept her. When Hushi used her bone whip to attack, the gourd bottle would dodge and withdraw to a safe distance, swinging its rotund body as it continued to ridicule her efforts. Hushi's eyes slowly hardened. It seemed like the gourd bottle was able to clearly read her mind, as it was able to predict her every action. Since there was no way to guess what her opponent's first strike would be, she could only catch him off guard with a surprise attack. With her next course of action planned, Hushi pretended to use her evade technique, and sure enough, the gourd bottle went to attack her with a strong amount of spiritual pressure. Yet Hushi not only didn't stop this time, rather, she released all of her spiritual power. So without retreating, and instead continuing forward, her whole body was like a sharply honed blade as she dashed towards the gourd bottle. In a split second, Hushi's whole body released a bitingly cold, murderous aura that could cause people to tremble. The old beggar man's expression abruptly changed. Originally he had had the look of one watching a good play, but now he was slightly startled as he stared blankly at Hushi. And due to his absent-mindedness, the gourd bottle's attacks halted and it froze in midair. With a loud crack, the gourd bottle was split in half by the bone whip, before it then shattered into hundreds of small pieces and fell to the ground. This caused the spiritual wine inside to cascade out, permeating the air of the alley with the smell of wine. The old beggar man stared blankly once again, then immediately rushed over to the gourd bottle in distress. As he reached the puddle of wine, he repeatedly walked around it as he breathed in the fragrance of wine. "Ah, my wine, my divine wine! You must be a girl who's unable to tell the difference between good and bad. Do you know that this wine isn't easy to get? Only after trading away 1,000 treasures was I finally able to get this small amount. Did you know that throughout all of Yanjing City there isn't a second bottle? Hushi raised her nose into the air, disgust promptly revealing itself on her face. What divine wine! According to what she had seen, calling it imitation wine would be good enough. It could in no way come close to matching the spiritual wine that she currently had fermenting in the 9th secluded spirit spring. When she thought of the fruit wine that she had brewed in her past life, she knew that even the taste of this wine was incomparable to that. Apart from the small amount of spiritual energy that the spilled wine had held, what was so special about it? Furthermore, being unable to find another bottle in all of Yanjing City? Why not just say that you hadn't seen another one in the whole world? The old beggar man grabbed Hushi's shoulders and yelled, I don't care. Baby doll, it's you who knocked over my wine, so quickly replace it as compensation. Otherwise, I'll finish you. Hushi's complexion turned black and she glared at him. What do you mean, you smelly old man? It was obviously you who attacked first, so why should I compensate you? I don't care. The old beggar man was furious. You had better compensate me for my precious divine wine. If you don't, then in the future, you can just become my little maiden girl. 1. Similar to the concept of child angels in the West, maiden girls and boys are children who serve the deities in heaven or temples. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.